Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1. When I began remodeling the old house I inherited, I knocked down a wall expecting insulation or wiring. Instead, I uncovered a sealed doorway. No hinges, no knob, just wood boards bolted tight. Curiosity outweighed fear. I pried them off. Behind it was a narrow passage that led to a tiny hidden room. Inside, the air was stale. There were children's clothes hanging from nails, newspaper clippings pasted to the walls, and an old camera facing a stained mattress. I thought I'd stumbled upon something abandoned until I saw the fresh food wrappers in the corner and the unmistakable sound of breathing that didn't belong to me. The breathing stopped the moment I stepped inside. My chest tightened as I stood frozen, listening to the silence that followed. The room felt alive despite its emptiness, as if someone had just vanished into thin air. I counted the clothes hanging on those rusty nails, 7 different sizes, all children's garments, worn and faded. Some still carried the faint scent of fabric softener, too fresh for something abandoned. The newspaper clippings caught my eye next. They covered almost every inch of the walls, layered thick like desperate wallpaper. Missing children, all of them. Headlines screaming about disappearances, worried parents pleading for information, search parties combing through woods and abandoned buildings. The dates spanned decades, some yellowed with age, others crisp and recent. My hands trembled as I peeled back corners, finding layer upon layer of similar stories underneath. That old camera sat on a makeshift tripod, its lens pointing directly at the stained mattress in the corner. The mattress bore dark spots that could have been anything, but my mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. I approached it carefully, noting how the fabric was compressed in the center, forming the outline of small bodies. The smell hit me then, a mixture of fear, unwashed fabric, and something else I couldn't identify but made my stomach turn. I backed out of that room and called the authorities. They arrived within the hour, flooding my inherited house with investigators, photographers, and forensic specialists. The lead detective, a woman with tired eyes and calloused hands, walked through that hidden space methodically. She asked me questions I couldn't answer. Had I known about this room? Did my relative ever mention anything unusual? Had there been strange sounds, unexplained activities, visitors who seemed out of place? The truth was, I barely knew the person who left me this house. A distant relative who kept to themselves, rarely spoke at family gatherings, always seemed to watch children with an intensity that made others uncomfortable. Everyone assumed they were just awkward, antisocial. Now those memories took on a different meaning. Days passed before the forensics team finished their work. They found fingerprints, hair samples, and traces of sedatives in the mattress fibers. The camera contained dozens of photographs, all of children in various states of distress. But here's what haunted me most. Several of the children in those photos were never reported missing. They simply disappeared from families who, for whatever reason, never contacted authorities. The detective returned to interview me multiple times. Each conversation felt like an interrogation, her questions becoming more pointed, more personal. She wanted to know about my relationship with my relative, about my own background, about why I'd chosen to renovate that particular wall first. The implication was clear. I was no longer just the person who discovered the room. I was a suspect. I started researching on my own, combing through old records, searching for connections between my relative and the missing children. What I found disturbed me more than the hidden room itself. Several of the children had been fostered through agencies where my relative volunteered. Others had attended community centers where they helped with activities. The pattern was there, methodical and careful, spanning years of calculated access. But then I found something that changed everything. A journal hidden in my relative's bedroom, filled with detailed observations about local families, schedules, routines. The handwriting was meticulous, obsessive. Page after page of notes about which children walked alone, which parents worked late, which houses had poor lighting or absent neighbors. The last entry was dated just weeks before their death, describing a new target, a child who matched the size of those clothes still hanging in that hidden room. The investigation continued, but something felt wrong. The detective's questions began focusing on details I'd never mentioned, information I hadn't provided. She knew about the journal before I told her about it. She was familiar with my relative's volunteer history before I'd done my research. It was as if she'd been investigating this case long before I knocked down that wall. I started watching her more carefully during our meetings. The way she took notes, the questions she avoided asking, the evidence she seemed less interested in pursuing. When I mentioned the fresh food wrappers I'd found in that room, she dismissed them as irrelevant. When I asked about DNA testing on the clothes, she said the lab was backlogged. When I pressed about interviewing families of the missing children, she told me to leave the investigating to professionals. One evening, I was sorting through more of my relatives' belongings when I found a box of photographs tucked behind old tax returns. These weren't the disturbing images from the hidden room. These were normal family photos, holiday gatherings, community events. In several of them, I recognized the detective. She was younger, wearing civilian clothes, standing close to my relative at what appeared to be volunteer appreciation dinners. The realization hit me like cold water. She hadn't been assigned to this case randomly. She knew about that room before I found it. She'd been protecting my relative, and now she was protecting herself. I made copies of everything before our next meeting. When she arrived, I laid the photos on the table between us. Her expression didn't change, but her hands stopped moving. The silence stretched between us like a drawn blade. She asked me what I thought those photos proved. I told her they proved she'd lied about her connection to the case. She reminded me that I was the one who'd inherited a house with a room full of evidence of child abuse. She suggested that maybe I'd known about it all along, that maybe the apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. The case went cold, the evidence disappeared into storage. The families of the missing children were told the investigation was ongoing, but no arrests were made. The detective was transferred to a different department. I was advised to keep quiet about what I'd found, for legal reasons they wouldn't specify. I still live in that house. I sealed up the hidden room again, but I can't forget what was behind those walls. Sometimes I hear sounds in the night, footsteps, whispers, the soft click of a camera shutter. I tell myself it's the old house settling, pipes expanding, imagination fed by guilt and unresolved questions. But I know the truth is more complicated than that. Justice wasn't served. The real perpetrators were never held accountable. And somewhere out there, children are still missing. Families are still searching, and the people responsible are still free to continue what they started in that hidden room. The worst part isn't what I found, it's what I'll never know, how many children suffered in that space, how long the abuse continued, how many people knew and chose to look the other way. The breathing I heard that first day might have been my imagination, or it might have been the ghost of something far worse than I was prepared to uncover. I've learned to live with uncertainty, but I'll never learn to live with the knowledge that somewhere, in rooms hidden behind other walls, the horror continues. And I'll never know if the person staring back at me in the mirror is someone who helped expose the truth, or someone who helped bury it deeper than it was before. Crime 2, I never expected the police to knock on my door, especially not with a warrant to dig up my backyard. They found it exactly where the anonymous tip said it would be, 6 feet down, wrapped in plastic. A bloodied hammer linked to a cold case from across the state. I had never seen it before, or so I thought. The more I looked at it, the more familiar it became. Not from a store, not from a movie. My hands remembered the weight. And when I checked my old storage bins in the shed, I found matching tools, and one was missing. The detective handling my case had tired eyes, the kind that came from seeing too much. She sat across from me in the sterile interview room, her fingers drumming against the metal table in a rhythm that matched my accelerating heartbeat. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everything feel unreal. "Walk me through your relationship with the victim," she said, sliding a photograph across the table. The face staring back at me was younger than I remembered, frozen in a smile that seemed almost mocking now. My throat went dry as recognition hit me like cold water. It was someone I had known briefly, peripherally. We had worked together on a community project several seasons ago. I remembered arguing about budget allocations, about priorities. The conversations had grown heated, personal, but murder, the word felt foreign in my mouth when I tried to say it aloud. The detective leaned forward. The anonymous caller knew exactly where to find the weapon. They described your garden layout perfectly, down to the placement of your rose bushes. That kind of detail doesn't come from a casual observer. I closed my eyes, trying to recall who might have visited my home recently. The mailman, certainly. A few neighbors had stopped by during a block party. My sister had helped me plant those roses, her hands dirty with soil, laughing as we worked. But none of them could have known about the hammer. None of them had any reason to know. "I need to see my shed again," I told the detective. She raised an eyebrow but nodded. Standing in my backyard under police supervision felt surreal. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze, marking the spot where they had excavated my carefully tended garden. The hole gaped like an open wound in the earth, surrounded by my scattered tulip bulbs and crushed daffodils. My shed stood unchanged, its weathered wooden door slightly ajar as always. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight filtering through the small window. My tool collection hung on pegboard hooks, each implement outlined in black marker to show its proper place. The system had been my father's idea, inherited along with the house and most of its contents. The empty hook mocked me. Its outline showed exactly what should have been there, a claw hammer, 16 ounces, with a worn wooden handle. I ran my finger along the hook, feeling the slight coating of dust that had settled around the absent tool's shadow. How long had it been missing? I couldn't remember the last time I had needed a hammer for anything. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Saw the news, are you okay?" I stared at the message, wondering how to explain something I didn't understand myself. The media had picked up the story quickly. Local man questioned in connection with cold case murder. My neighbors were probably watching from their windows, whispering behind curtains. I called her back instead of texting. Her voice was strained when she answered, speaking in the careful tone people use around broken things. "I don't understand what's happening," I told her. "Someone buried evidence in my yard, someone who knew where I keep my tools." There was a long pause. "Do you remember when we planted those roses? You were so particular about the placement, measuring distances with your hands. You said you wanted them deep enough that nothing would disturb them." The memory surfaced slowly, like something rising from dark water. We had dug that spot together, her complaining about hitting roots while I insisted we go deeper. The soil had been harder than expected, clay-rich and stubborn. We had taken turns with the shovel, our hands blistering despite the gloves. "You used a hammer that afternoon," she continued, her voice growing smaller, "to break up some of the clay chunks. I remember because the handle was loose and you kept having to stop to tighten it." The world seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the phone tighter, my palms suddenly slick with sweat. "What happened to the hammer after we finished?" "I don't know. I assumed you put it back in the shed like always." But I couldn't remember putting it away. The afternoon had ended abruptly when we received word that our uncle had been hospitalized. We had dropped everything, rushing to clean up and drive across town. The garden project was forgotten in the chaos of family crisis and medical updates. I ended the call and walked back to the shed, studying the pegboard more carefully. Other tools showed signs of recent use, dust patterns disturbed, slight discoloration where hands had gripped them, but the hammer's hook was pristine, untouched for months or longer. The detective found me there, staring at the empty space. "Something you want to tell me?" I explained about the rose planting, about the rushed departure, about my inability to remember what happened to the hammer afterward. She listened without judgment, making notes in her small leather notebook. "The victim was killed during that same period," she said quietly. "The coroner estimates it happened within that specific time frame when you say the tool went missing." My hands began to shake, but I was at the hospital. My uncle's medical records will show visiting hours, family meetings. I was accounted for. "The hospital is only an hour away. There would have been gaps in your presence, natural breaks in a long vigil, times when you might have stepped out for air, to make phone calls, to deal with other obligations." I tried to reconstruct those difficult days, but grief and stress had made the memories fuzzy. I remembered sleeping in waiting room chairs, eating vending machine sandwiches, calling relatives with updates, but the specific hours blurred together into one extended nightmare of antiseptic smells and whispered conversations. The victim's name had appeared in my phone records, the detective informed me later. A brief call placed during the hospital vigil, lasting less than 30 seconds. I had no memory of making it, but the evidence was irrefutable. The call had gone to voicemail. "What did you say in the message?" she asked. I genuinely didn't know. My phone had been constantly buzzing with family communications, work emails marked urgent, neighbors offering help with the house while I was away. I might have called dozens of people during those chaotic days without remembering each conversation. But the victim hadn't survived to hear whatever message I had left. The case file grew thicker as more connections emerged. My fingerprints were on the hammer handle, which made sense since it was my tool. Soil samples from my garden matched dirt found on the victim's clothing. Witnesses placed my car in the vicinity of the crime scene, though I had no memory of being there. Each piece of evidence felt both foreign and familiar, like looking at photographs of myself that I didn't remember posing for. The detective's questions grew more pointed, her theories more specific. The anonymous tip that had started everything seemed less like a cruel coincidence and more like someone trying to clean their own conscience. But my sister had been with me at the hospital for most of that period. My neighbors had seen my car leave and return, but couldn't specify exactly when. The victim and I had argued publicly, but so had many people in our community project. Nothing pointed definitively to guilt or innocence. I hired a lawyer who specialized in circumstantial cases. She reviewed the evidence with practiced detachment, highlighting inconsistencies and gaps in the prosecution's timeline. but she also prepared me for the possibility that sometimes questions don't have satisfying answers, that reasonable doubt doesn't always lead to comfortable resolution. The trial, when it finally came, felt like watching someone else's life unfold in slow motion. Witnesses testified about arguments I barely remembered, experts analyzed soil samples and blood patterns, character witnesses spoke about my reputation in the community. Through it all, I sat quietly, studying the faces of the jurors and wondering what truth they would decide upon. The verdict was not guilty, but it felt less like vindication than suspension. The real killer was never found. The anonymous teepster never came forward. My hammer remained in evidence storage, its secrets locked away with bureaucratic permanence. I moved away eventually, selling the house to strangers who probably never learned about its history. But sometimes in my new garden, when I'm working with tools whose histories I can trace, I catch myself looking at my hands and wondering what else they might remember that my mind has chosen to forget. The roses we planted that day are probably still blooming in someone else's yard, their roots growing deep into soil that once held darker secrets. And somewhere, perhaps, the real truth remains buried, waiting for the right person to dig deep enough to find it. Crime 3, it started with a music box, same tune as the one I had as a kid. Then came the teddy bear, stitched the same way mine tore. Next, a toy train worn down in the exact spot I used to bite it. Every few days, another item appeared on my doorstep. I asked my parents, they'd thrown everything out decades ago. I didn't know who was returning my past to me or why. But when I found a Polaroid under the bear's ribbon showing me sleeping, taken from inside my room, I realized someone didn't want me to remember. They wanted me to relive. The music box sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I touched it again. The melody that once brought comfort now felt hollow, each note stretching longer than it should. I could smell dust mixed with something else, a faint sweetness that reminded me of the perfume my babysitter used to wear, the one who disappeared when I was 7. I called my mother that evening. Her voice tightened when I described the toys. She insisted they donated everything to charity after we moved, but there was something in her pause, a hesitation that made my chest feel heavy. She asked if I'd been sleeping well lately, if work was stressing me. The conversation ended with her promising to check with my father, though I knew she wouldn't. The teddy bear arrived on a Tuesday, brown fur matted in places, one eye slightly loose, exactly like mine had been. I remembered chewing on its ear during thunderstorms, how it tasted like safety and childhood fears. But this bear smelled different. Not like dust or storage, but like someone had been holding it recently. Like skin and soap and something I couldn't quite place. I started checking my locks obsessively, double-checking windows. The photograph haunted me, my adult face peaceful in sleep, taken from an angle that meant someone had been standing right beside my bed. The image quality was poor, grainy like old film, but clear enough to make my hands shake every time I looked at it. The toy train came next, its red paint chipped in that familiar pattern where my tiny teeth had left marks. I'd forgotten about my habit of biting toys until I saw those indentations again. The metal wheels still turned, making the same soft clicking sound I remembered. But when I wound it up, it moved in a circle I didn't recognize, a path it had never taken in my childhood bedroom. I started keeping a journal, writing down every detail I could remember about each item. The dates they appeared, their condition, any smells or sensations they triggered. Patterns began emerging that made my skin crawl. Each toy arrived exactly 1 week after the last. Each one corresponded to a specific age, the music box from when I was 5, the bear from age 6, the train from 7. My neighbor mentioned seeing someone on my porch several times. a figure in dark clothing, always in the evening when the light made identification impossible. The description was vague: average height, careful movements, someone who knew which floorboards creaked, someone who wanted to avoid being noticed but didn't mind being seen. I started researching my babysitter's disappearance. The local library's newspaper archives painted a disturbing picture. She'd vanished without explanation, leaving behind personal belongings in an abandoned car. The investigation had stalled quickly, focusing on a boyfriend who had an alibi. But reading between the lines, I found mentions of concerning behavior with the children in her care and parents who chose not to pursue certain allegations. The doll arrived on the 8th week, a plastic baby doll with matted blonde hair and a dress I remembered picking out myself. But this doll felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Its face seemed different, older somehow, and when I tilted it, the eyes didn't close like they used to. Instead, they stayed open, staring with an intensity that made me want to throw it away immediately. But I couldn't. Each toy felt like a puzzle piece, a clue to something my adult mind had buried. I found myself staying awake longer, listening for footsteps on my porch. The house creaked differently now, every sound loaded with possibility and dread. I decided to install a security camera. The process felt like violating my own privacy, but I needed to see who was doing this. The first few nights showed nothing, just empty porch footage and the occasional cat. Then, on the 4th night, a shape appeared at the edge of the frame. The figure moved with deliberate care, placing something small near my door before retreating into darkness. The timestamp showed it happened while I was asleep, but something about the person's posture seemed familiar. The way they favored their left leg, the careful placement of each step, details that tickled the edge of recognition without fully surfacing. The next morning brought a box of crayons, 16 colors broken in the exact pattern I remembered, with my teeth marks still visible on the blue one. Inside the box was another photograph, this one showing me coloring at a kitchen table I recognized. But in the background, slightly out of focus, stood a figure I couldn't quite make out. I showed the photograph to my father when my mother wasn't around. His reaction was immediate and troubling, color draining from his face as he stared at the image. He asked where I'd gotten it, and when I explained about the toys, he went silent for a long time. Finally, he told me about the settlement they'd received after our former babysitter's family tried to blame them for her disappearance. The money had paid for our move, our fresh start, but there had been conditions, agreements not to discuss certain events, legal documents that sealed away parts of my childhood I'd apparently chosen to forget. My father's hands shook as he spoke, and he kept looking over his shoulder as if someone might be listening. That night I dreamed about hands braiding my hair, gentle fingers that lingered longer than they should, a voice whispering things I couldn't understand. I woke with the taste of that old perfume in my mouth and the certainty that someone had been in my room while I slept. The final toy arrived the next evening while I was watching from my living room window. The figure approached boldly this time, as if they knew I was observing. They wore a hood that obscured their face, but their movements were confident, familiar. They placed a small wooden horse on my doorstep, the last toy I'd owned before we moved. But as they turned to leave, the streetlight caught their profile for just a moment. The shape of the nose, the way they held their shoulders, features that matched the blurred background figure in the photograph, features that belonged to someone who should have been dead for over 20 years. I never opened my door that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen until sunrise, staring at that wooden horse through the window and trying to understand what my parents had paid to forget. The toys stopped coming after that, but sometimes I still catch that faint sweetness in the air, perfume and secrets and the weight of buried truth. The horse remains on my doorstep. I can't bring myself to touch it, but I can't throw it away either, because now I remember what I was meant to forget, and I understand why some memories are better left buried, even when they keep finding their way back to your door. Crime 4, strange sounds in my apartment didn't bother me at first. Buildings settle, pipes knock. But one night I heard someone whisper my name through the air vent. I froze. Then it spoke again, repeating something only I should know. A childhood memory I've never told anyone. I climbed onto a chair, opened the vent, and called out. Silence. Until I heard laughter, raspy, broken. I set up a recorder near the duct. When I played it back the next day, it wasn't just my name. It was a list of everything I'd ever hidden, and at the end, a threat. I'm almost out. The voice knew about the accident when I was 12, how I'd watched my neighbor's dog get hit by a car and never told anyone I could have prevented it, how I'd stolen money from my mother's purse to buy candy, replacing it with coins from my piggy bank. These weren't just secrets, they were fragments of guilt I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself they never happened. I started recording every night. The voice became clearer, more confident. It spoke in fragments, like someone reading from scattered notes. Sometimes it would pause, as if checking facts against a source I couldn't see. The tone was familiar but distorted, like hearing your own voice played back through a broken speaker. My building was old, converted from a hotel decades ago. The air ducts connected every unit, snaking through walls thick enough to muffle most sounds. I'd lived here for 3 years and never heard my neighbors beyond the occasional footstep overhead. But this voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through metal channels I couldn't map. I researched the building's history. The previous tenant in my unit had been evicted for non-payment. Before that, an elderly woman who died in her sleep. Before her, a young couple who'd moved out suddenly after 6 months. I found their forwarding address and called. The woman answered, nervous, when I mentioned the building. "We heard things," she said, "voices, not through the walls, through the vents. At first we thought it was just sound carrying from other apartments, but then it started talking about us. Personal things, things we'd never said out loud." She hung up before I could ask more questions. The recordings were getting longer. The voice had started describing my daily routine with unsettling accuracy. How I always checked the locks twice before bed. How I kept a spare key under a specific loose brick near the entrance. How I'd recently started taking a different route to work because the usual path reminded me of someone I'd rather forget. I began staying awake, waiting for the voice to begin. It usually started around the same time each night, when the building was quiet and the heating system cycled on. The metal ducts would creak, expand, and then came the whisper. Always my name first, drawn out like a question. Then the secrets, delivered in that same broken rhythm. One night I heard typing, soft, deliberate keystrokes echoing through the ductwork. Someone was transcribing, documenting. I grabbed a flashlight and examined the vent cover more carefully. The screws were loose, looser than they should be for something that hadn't been touched in years. Dust patterns around the edges suggested recent disturbance. I unscrewed the cover completely and shone my light into the duct. The beam revealed something I hadn't expected, fresh scratches in the metal, as if someone had been crawling through regularly. The scratches led deeper into the wall, toward the building's central shaft. Following the building's blueprint, I traced the ductwork to a maintenance room in the basement. The door was supposed to be locked. Management had told me it was off-limits to tenants, but when I tested the handle, it turned easily. Inside, I found cables running along the walls, connecting to a recording device I didn't recognize. Multiple microphones were wired into the ventilation system, creating a network that could capture sound from every unit. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The The disturbing part was the notebooks, dozens of them, filled with handwritten observations about tenants. My name appeared frequently, alongside details about my habits, my visitors, my phone conversations. But I wasn't the only one being watched. Every tenant in the building had their own section, their own catalog of secrets and behaviors. The handwriting was shaky but legible, obsessive. Someone had been documenting our lives with the dedication of a researcher, noting patterns, recording conversations, building profiles. The most recent entries were about me, tracking my investigation into the voice. Whoever was writing these knew I'd been making recordings. They knew I'd called the previous tenant. They knew I'd found the maintenance room. At the bottom of the latest page, a note, subject becoming aware, may need to relocate soon. I heard footsteps in the hallway above, slow, deliberate steps moving toward the stairwell. I grabbed one of the notebooks and left quickly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Back in my apartment, I read through months of observations. The detail was overwhelming. Conversations I'd had with friends, arguments with family members, embarrassing moments I thought were private. But the entries weren't just observational. They included interpretations, psychological assessments, predictions about behavior. Someone was studying us like specimens, trying to understand our motivations and fears. The voice in the vent wasn't just sharing my secrets, it was testing my reactions, gauging how I'd respond to having my privacy violated. I checked the building's tenant records. The maintenance room was supposed to be managed by a company that had gone out of business 2 years ago. No one currently had authorized access. Management claimed they'd been meaning to change the locks but hadn't gotten around to it. Either they were lying, or someone had been using the space without permission. The voice didn't come that night or the next. The silence was worse than the whispers. I found myself checking the recorder obsessively, adjusting the microphone, hoping to capture something that would explain what I'd discovered. But the ductwork remained quiet, and the building felt different, heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. A week later, I received an eviction notice. Noise complaints from other tenants, disruptive behavior, damage to building property. The complaints were signed by neighbors I'd never met, describing incidents that hadn't happened. When I confronted the building manager, he seemed genuinely confused but unwilling to reverse the decision. I had 30 days to find a new place. As I packed, I kept thinking about the notebooks, about the level of detail someone had accumulated about my life. The voice had known things even I'd forgotten, childhood memories, fleeting thoughts, secrets I'd never spoken aloud. How long had someone been watching? How many other buildings had similar systems? On my last night, I heard the voice again, faint, almost apologetic. It thanked me for being such an interesting subject. It wished me well in my new home. It hoped I'd learned something valuable about privacy and trust. Then it gave me an address, a building across town where I might find the rent reasonable and the neighbors quiet. I never went to that address. I never reported what I'd found. The notebooks disappeared from the maintenance room before I could show them to anyone. The building manager claimed he'd never seen recording equipment in the basement. The previous tenant I'd called insisted she'd never spoken to me about voices in the vents. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, if the stress of living alone in an old building had made me paranoid, creating mysteries where none existed. But then I remember the scratches in the ductwork, the loose screws, the sound of typing in the walls. I remember how it felt to hear my own secrets repeated back to me by a voice that shouldn't have known them. I live in a different building now. The vents are newer, the walls thicker, but I still listen for whispers in the dark. I still check the screws on every air vent cover. And sometimes when the heating system cycles on and the metal ducts begin to expand, I think I hear something familiar, a voice that knows more than it should. a voice that's always almost out. Crime 5, rent was cheap, the house was spacious, and the landlord barely asked questions. I thought I got lucky. But from the first night I heard movement under the floor, soft, deliberate. I assumed rats. Then I noticed food missing from the fridge and muddy footprints in the hallway. The basement door was padlocked, but the lock wasn't secured from the outside. It was rigged inside to keep someone from getting out. I broke it open. The stairs led down into pitch black. On the wall, carved into the cement, were my initials next to a date I didn't recognize. The smell hit me first when I descended those stairs. Not decay, something more intimate. Human sweat mixed with dampness and the metallic scent of old pipes. My phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a makeshift living space. A mattress pushed against the far wall, blankets that looked familiar, a small camping stove, empty food containers I recognized from my own pantry. Someone had been living down here for weeks, maybe longer. I backed up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. The carved initials burned in my memory. They were mine, but the handwriting looked different, shakier, more desperate. The date beneath them was from 6 months ago, before I'd even seen this house listed online. The landlord's voice echoed in my head from our brief meeting. He'd kept checking his phone, avoiding eye contact. When I asked about the basement, he'd waved dismissively, mentioning storage space and old furnace equipment. Nothing about padlocks, nothing about carved messages. I called him immediately, voicemail. I tried again an hour later, still nothing. That night I pushed my dresser against the bedroom door and barely slept. Every creak of the house settling made me freeze, but the sounds from below had stopped completely. Whoever was down there knew I'd found them. The next morning I drove to the property management office listed on my lease. The receptionist, a woman with tired eyes and coffee-stained fingers, looked confused when I mentioned the landlord's name. "We don't have anyone by that name working here," she said, flipping through papers. "Can you show me your lease?" The address was correct. The rental amount matched what I'd been paying, but the signature at the bottom belonged to someone who apparently didn't exist. "This is strange," she murmured, studying the document. "We've had issues with this property before. The previous tenant reported some unusual activity and broke their lease early, left in the middle of the night." My mouth went dry. What kind of activity? She hesitated, glancing around the empty office. They claimed someone was living in their house without permission, eating their food, using their bathroom. Management investigated but found nothing. We assumed it was stress-related paranoia. I thought about the carved initials, about the date I didn't recognize. What was the previous tenant's name? She checked her records. When she looked up, her face had gone pale. "The same as yours, same spelling, same middle initial." The drive home felt endless. My hands trembled against the steering wheel as I processed what she'd told me. Someone with my exact name had lived in this house before me. Someone who'd experienced the same strange phenomena. Someone who'd fled in terror. Back at the house, I stood in the kitchen staring at the basement door. The broken padlock lay on the floor where I'd left it. I needed to go back down. I needed to understand. This time I brought a real flashlight and my phone recording. The basement felt different in the afternoon light filtering through grimy windows, less threatening but somehow more real. I could see the extent of the living space now. A corner had been converted into a makeshift bathroom. Personal items were arranged on makeshift shelves, a toothbrush, medications, photographs. The photographs stopped me cold. They were pictures of me, Not recent ones, but images I recognized from social media, from my previous apartment, from places I'd been months before moving here. Someone had been watching me, documenting my life, preparing for my arrival. But that wasn't the worst part. Mixed in with the photos of me were older images. Another person with my build, my hair color, even similar facial features. Pictures of them in this same house, in rooms I now called home. The timestamps went back years. I found a journal wedged behind the makeshift bed. The handwriting matched the carved initials upstairs. My initials, but not my hand. The entry started optimistically, describing a new rental, a fresh start, excitement about the affordable rent and spacious rooms. Then the tone shifted, strange sounds, missing food, the growing certainty that someone else was in the house, the discovery of the basement, the carved message, the desperate attempts to contact the landlord who didn't exist. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. I can't stay here anymore, they're getting bolder. I found them upstairs yesterday in my bedroom watching me sleep. When I confronted them, they just smiled and said they'd been me longer than I had. I'm leaving tonight. I'm going to find somewhere safe and figure out what's happening to us. Listen. I flipped through more pages looking for clues about who had written this. In the back cover, I found a driver's license tucked into the binding. The photo showed someone who could have been my twin. The name was identical to mine, but the address was different, a place I'd never lived. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You found the journal. Good, we need to talk. I spun around, but the basement was empty. The message continued. Meet me at the coffee shop on the corner, the one with the blue awning. Come alone, don't tell anyone about this. I knew the place. I'd been there every morning since moving in. The walk there felt surreal. Every person I passed seemed to be watching me, evaluating me, comparing me to someone else. The barista behind the counter looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen her before. I ordered my usual and found a table in the back corner. The coffee tasted different today, bitter, medicinal. That's when I noticed the person sitting across the room, partially hidden behind a newspaper. They lowered it slowly, and I found myself staring at my own face. Not similar, not like a twin. Exactly my face, down to a small scar on my chin from a childhood accident. They stood up and walked over, sliding into the seat across from me with fluid confidence. I know this is confusing, they said, and even the voice was mine, but you need to understand what's happening here. I tried to speak, but found my voice had vanished. The house isn't just a rental property. It's a testing ground. They've been bringing people like us here for years. People with specific characteristics, specific backgrounds. They want to see how we adapt, how we survive, how we break. The coffee shop seemed to be spinning around me. Who's they? The people who carved those initials. The ones who have been documenting our lives, our reactions, our fear. They're studying us. I thought about the photographs, the journal entries, the mysterious landlord who didn't exist. But why do you look exactly like me? They smiled, and it was like looking in a mirror, because I am you, or rather, I was the you who lived in that house before, the you who broke under the pressure and agreed to help them find a replacement. The world tilted, the coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering against the floor. Other customers turned to look, but their faces seemed wrong somehow, too interested, too knowing. The person in the basement isn't a victim, they continued. They're the previous iteration, the one who came before me, and now you're here, which means it's my turn to move on. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my chair. This is insane. You're not me. This isn't real. Check your wallet, they said calmly. I fumbled for my ID with shaking hands. The photo looked right, but something was off about the details. The address was wrong. The issue date was impossible. It was dated from the future. They're very good at creating documentation, my double explained. They've been perfecting this process for years. Each iteration gets closer to seamless integration. I ran from the coffee shop, ignoring their calls behind me. But as I stumbled down the street, I realized I couldn't remember exactly how to get home. The familiar landmarks seemed foreign. Street signs I'd read 100 times now looked different. By the time I reached the house, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. Inside, everything felt wrong. The furniture was in slightly different positions. The photographs on the walls showed me in places I'd never been, with people I'd never met. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection looked back at me with eyes that seemed too knowing, too satisfied. I returned to the basement, searching for more evidence, more answers. The journal was gone. The photographs had been cleared away. Even the carved initials on the wall had been painted over with fresh cement. But in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, I found something new. A small camera, its red recording light blinking steadily in the darkness. Above me, I heard footsteps moving through my house. Confident, familiar footsteps that knew exactly where everything belonged. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding with each step. At the top, I found someone sitting at my kitchen table, eating from my refrigerator, looking perfectly at home. It was me again, but this version looked different, calmer, more settled. They looked up when I entered, smiled with my smile, and gestured to the empty chair across from them. "Welcome home," they said. "We've been waiting for you." I realized then that I didn't remember how long I'd been living in this house. The lease I'd signed, the conversation with the property management office, even the discovery of the basement, all of it felt like memories that belonged to someone else. Someone who looked exactly like me. Someone who had been me before I became who I was now. The camera in the basement continued recording, documenting another successful transition, another iteration in an endless cycle of replacement and renewal. And somewhere in the walls of this house, carved into cement that would soon be painted over again, new initials were being etched by trembling hands that didn't quite know who they belonged to anymore. Crime 6, a friend sent me a news article about a robbery across the country. A sketch of the suspect looked exactly like me. I laughed it off until more sketches appeared. Assaults, burglaries, even a disappearance. All different cities, same face, mine. I contacted police, thinking I was the victim of identity theft. They wouldn't give me answers, just warnings to stay available for questioning. Then came the phone call, a distorted voice whispering, "You're doing great, just keep forgetting." I checked my closet. One of my jackets was damp, and there was a key in the pocket with initials that weren't mine. The first sketch had been crude, drawn by someone who clearly wasn't an artist, but the eyes were unmistakable. That particular slope of the brow, the way my left eyebrow sits slightly higher than the right, a detail only someone who'd studied my face would notice. I stared at the newspaper clipping on my kitchen table, the morning coffee growing cold as I traced the pencil lines with my finger. My friend had texted the article with a laughing emoji. "Looks like you have a twin in the crime world," she'd written. But as I examined the sketch more closely, my stomach began to tighten. The jawline was too precise. The small scar above my upper lip from a childhood accident. How could a witness have seen that clearly during a robbery? I searched online for more details about the case. A convenience store had been robbed, the clerk describing a man who spoke softly, almost politely, as he demanded money. The description matched my height, my build, even the way I tend to stand with my weight shifted to my left foot. But I'd never been to that state, never set foot in that city. 3 days later, another sketch appeared in a different news outlet, this time an assault case. The victim described her attacker as someone who seemed familiar, who apologized before hitting her. The drawing was more detailed this time. The artist had captured the way my hair falls across my forehead, the small mole near my left temple. My hands began to shake as I printed the article. I called the police department handling the convenience store case. The detective who answered sounded tired, irritated. When I explained the situation, there was a long pause. Finally, he asked for my name, my address, my social security number. He told me someone would be in touch and hung up before I could ask any questions. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the victim's description, someone who seemed familiar. I tried to remember where I'd been on the dates of these crimes, but the days blurred together in my memory. My job requires a lot of travel, presentations in different cities, hotel rooms that all look the same. I started keeping a journal, trying to reconstruct my movements. The third sketch appeared 2 weeks later, a burglary this time, but what made my blood run cold was the accompanying article. The homeowner said the intruder had known exactly where to find her jewelry box, had moved through her house like he'd been there before. She described a man who'd touched her family photos, who'd seemed to study them before taking what he came for. I drove to the neighborhood described in the article. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed to prove to myself I'd never been there. But as I turned onto the street, something felt wrong. The houses looked familiar, not like I'd been there before, but like I'd seen them in a dream. I parked across from the address mentioned in the police report. The house was small, painted yellow with white trim. In the front yard, a child's bicycle lay on its side. I sat in my car, staring at the windows, waiting for some memory to surface. Nothing came, but my hands were sweating against the steering wheel. A woman emerged from the house next door. She looked directly at me, her expression changing from curiosity to something else, recognition, maybe, or fear. She hurried back inside, and I saw her peek through her curtains. I started the engine and left, but I could feel her eyes following me down the street. The phone call came that night. The voice was distorted, mechanically altered, but somehow familiar. "You're doing great, just keep forgetting." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, replaying the words. The caller had known my number, had somehow known about the sketches, about my investigation. I checked my call log. The number showed as blocked, but something about the timing bothered me. The call had come exactly when I'd been thinking about the yellow house, about the woman's frightened face. How could someone know when I was thinking about the cases? My closet smelled different when I opened it the next morning. Not bad, just unfamiliar, like rain and something else I couldn't identify. My jacket, the one I'd worn to the office the day before, was hanging differently. The fabric felt damp when I touched it, and there was something in the pocket that hadn't been there before. The key was small brass with initials carved into the head. ML. I'd never seen it before, but it felt warm in my palm, like it had been recently used. I turned it over in my fingers, studying the teeth, the way the metal had been worn smooth by countless uses. Someone had put this in my pocket, but when and why? I thought about my commute, my office, the places I'd been the day before. The parking garage was dark, isolated. Anyone could have approached my car, but why leave a key? What was I supposed to do with it? The fourth sketch appeared in an online news blog. This time the crime was different, a missing person case. A young woman had disappeared and the last person seen with her matched my description. The sketch was the most detailed yet, showing not just my face but my expression, a look I recognized from my own mirror. The way I look when I'm concentrating, when I'm trying to remember something important. The article mentioned that the missing woman had been seen getting into a car with the suspect. They had security footage, but it was too dark to make out the license plate. The witness described the man as polite, as someone who seemed to know the victim. He'd called her by name, had convinced her to leave with him without a struggle. I read the article 3 times, each reading making my hands shake more violently. The woman's name was mentioned in the report, but I didn't recognize it. Her photo showed someone young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and a smile that seemed forced. I'd never seen her before, but something about her eyes seemed familiar. I called the police department handling the missing person case. This time the detective was more direct. "We need you to come in for questioning," he said. "There are some things we need to discuss." When I asked what things, he told me to bring a lawyer. The drive to the police station felt like moving through thick water. Every turn, every street sign seemed to take forever to reach. I kept thinking about the key in my pocket, about the damp jacket, about the phone call. Someone was watching me, someone who knew about the sketches, about my investigation. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to calm my breathing. The key felt heavy in my pocket, and I pulled it out to examine it again. The initials ML were carved deep into the brass, and I wondered if they belonged to the missing woman, but her name in the article had been different. The detective was younger than I'd expected, with dark circles under his eyes and the look of someone who'd been working too many cases. He led me to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. The walls were bare except for a mirror that I assumed was one-way glass. "We've been getting reports about you," he said, sitting across from me. "Multiple jurisdictions, multiple cases. You want to tell me what's going on?" I explained about the sketches, about finding my face in crime reports from cities I'd never visited. He listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small pad. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me directly. "The thing is," he said, "some of these crimes have evidence that points to you, not just witness descriptions, physical evidence." My mouth went dry. What kind of evidence? "Fingerprints, DNA, security footage from locations you claim you've never been to." He opened a folder and showed me photos, surveillance images of someone who looked exactly like me, time-stamped from dates I couldn't remember clearly. I stared at the photos, trying to find some detail that would prove they weren't me. But the man in the images wore my clothes, moved with my gait, had my exact profile. In one image, he was looking directly at the camera, and I could see the small scar above his upper lip. "I don't understand," I said. "I've never been to these places." The detective leaned back in his chair. "Your travel records show otherwise. Credit card purchases, hotel reservations, even rental car agreements, all in your name, all matching the dates of these crimes." He showed me more papers, receipts, confirmations, records I didn't remember creating. My signature was on documents I'd never seen before, approving expenses for trips I didn't remember taking. The handwriting was unmistakably mine, but I had no memory of signing any of these papers. "There's something else," the detective said. He pulled out a plastic evidence bag containing a key, the same key I had in my pocket, identical down to the initials carved in the brass. We found this at the scene of the missing person case. It opens a storage unit rented under your name. I reached into my pocket and felt the key there, solid and real. But there was another key in the evidence bag, exactly the same. I pulled out my key and placed it on the table next to the bag. They were identical. "How is that possible?" I asked. The detective studied both keys. "That's what we're trying to figure out. The storage unit contains items belonging to all the victims. Personal effects, jewelry, things that were reported stolen or missing." I felt the room spinning around me. "I want to see the storage unit." "I'm afraid that's not possible. It's evidence in multiple ongoing investigations." He gathered up the papers and photos. "We're going to need you to stay available for questioning. Don't leave the state." I left the police station with more questions than answers. The key in my pocket felt different now, heavier somehow. I drove home through streets that seemed unfamiliar, as if I was seeing them for the first time. My own neighborhood looked strange, the houses too close together, the trees too tall. At home, I went through my belongings systematically. My passport showed stamps from places I didn't remember visiting. My computer browser history contained searches for information about the victims, about the locations where the crimes had occurred. I found photographs on my phone, images of places I'd never been, people I'd never met, including the missing woman from the news article. The photos were taken from my perspective, as if I'd been there, as if I'd known these people. In one image, the missing woman was laughing at something off camera. In another, she was looking directly at the lens with an expression of trust, of familiarity. The metadata showed the photos were taken just days before she disappeared. I called my doctor, made an appointment for the next day. Something was wrong with my memory, with my perception of time. I needed medical answers, some explanation for the gaps in my recollection. But even as I made the appointment, I wondered if I was looking for answers I wasn't prepared to find. That night I dreamed about the yellow house, about the woman who'd watched me from her window. In the dream, I was inside the house, moving through rooms I somehow knew intimately. I could hear someone breathing in the next room, could smell that familiar scent of rain and something else I couldn't identify. I woke with the taste of copper in my mouth and dirt under my fingernails. My sheets were damp, and there was mud on my shoes I'd left by the front door before going to bed. Outside my window, dawn was breaking, but I had no memory of the night between sleeping and waking. The phone rang as I was cleaning the dirt from under my nails. The same distorted voice, the same mechanical alteration. "The key opens more than you think," it said. "Check the basement." I'd lived in this house for years, but I'd never been in the basement. The previous owner had sealed it off, said there was water damage. But now I found myself walking down the stairs I'd never noticed before, using the key that somehow fit the lock I'd never seen. The basement was larger than it should have been, stretching beyond the footprint of the house above. Along the walls were filing cabinets, photographs, detailed maps marked with dates and locations. In the center of the room was a desk with a computer, its screen showing multiple news articles about the crimes, about the victims, about me. I recognized my handwriting in the margins of the articles, notes I didn't remember making. Plans, observations, details about the victims' routines, their weaknesses, their fears. The missing woman's photo was pinned to a board, connected by red string to other images, other locations, other dates. On the desk was a journal open to an entry dated just days before. The handwriting was mine, but the words were from someone I didn't recognize. The forgetting is getting easier. Each time the gap gets longer. Soon, I won't remember any of it. I read through the journal, page after page of entries I didn't remember writing. Detailed accounts of following the victims, of learning their habits, of planning each crime. The voice in the entries was mine, but the thoughts were those of someone else, someone who lived in the spaces between my memories. The final entry was dated yesterday. The investigation is getting closer. Time to make a choice. Either remember everything or forget it all. I sat in the basement chair, surrounded by evidence of crimes I didn't remember committing, reading words I didn't remember writing. The key in my pocket felt warm, and I understood now that it had always been there, that I'd been carrying it through every day I couldn't remember, every night that disappeared from my memory. The phone rang again. This time I answered before the distorted voice could speak. "I know who you are," I said. "Do you?" The voice was clearer now, less mechanically altered. It sounded like me, but speaking words I would never say, because I'm not sure you're ready for that answer. I looked at my reflection in the computer screen, at the face that had appeared in so many sketches, so many crime scenes. The face looked back at me with eyes I recognized but didn't understand, with an expression that seemed both familiar and completely foreign. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you choose," the voice said. "Remember everything and face what you've done, or forget again and keep living the life you think is yours." I closed the journal and looked around the basement that couldn't exist, filled with evidence of crimes I couldn't remember. The key in my pocket was warm, and I realized I was holding it so tightly it had left marks on my palm. Somewhere above me, my phone was ringing, probably another detective with more questions I couldn't answer. But down here, in this room that wasn't supposed to exist, surrounded by proof of things I'd never done, I finally understood that the most dangerous person in my life had always been the one I trusted most completely, myself. Crime 7, I moved into a studio apartment after the last tenant vanished without a trace. Police had investigated and closed the file. While unpacking, I found a loose floorboard. Underneath was a notebook, worn and soaked with ink. It belonged to the girl who'd lived here before me. It described being watched, followed, touched in her sleep. Pages got darker, talk of cameras hidden in vents, locked doors opening on their own. The last entry read, "I think they're replacing me." I stared at that sentence for hours. Then I heard a knock at the door, not the front one, the one behind the closet. The sound was deliberate, 3 soft taps, then silence. I pressed my ear against the closet's back wall and heard nothing but my own heartbeat thundering in my chest. The wood felt cold against my skin, almost damp. I pushed aside hanging clothes and examined the wall more carefully. There were scratch marks near the baseboard, fresh gouges in the paint like fingernails had clawed desperately at the surface. The diary lay open on my kitchen table where I'd left it. Her handwriting started neat, controlled, but deteriorated with each entry. The girl wrote about mundane things at first: new job, favorite coffee shop, friendly neighbors. Then came subtle changes. Someone had been moving her mail. Keys went missing for days, then reappeared in strange places. Food disappeared from her refrigerator. She'd wake up exhausted, clothes wrinkled as if she'd been walking in her sleep. I called the landlord the next morning. His voice carried an edge when I mentioned the previous tenant. He claimed she'd broken her lease suddenly, left no forwarding address, abandoned most of her belongings, but the apartment had been completely empty when I moved in. Someone had cleared everything out meticulously, too meticulously. The building's other residents avoided eye contact when I asked about her. One elderly woman crossed herself and hurried away when I described finding the diary. A man on the second floor claimed he'd never seen any girl living in my unit, despite the lease records clearly showing her name. Their reactions felt rehearsed, like they'd agreed on a story and were sticking to it no matter what. I started reading the diary chronologically, tracing the girl's descent into paranoia or perhaps clarity. She wrote about finding her door unlocked after triple-checking the locks. Security cameras in the hallway mysteriously malfunctioned whenever she needed them most. Her phone would ring at odd hours with no one on the other end, just breathing and distant sounds like footsteps on concrete. The entries became more frantic. She discovered holes drilled in her walls, tiny openings behind picture frames and mirrors. Someone had been watching her for months, maybe years. She tried staying with friends, but the presence followed her. Hotel rooms, relatives' houses, even a shelter downtown, everywhere she went, the feeling of being observed persisted. One entry described finding her apartment rearranged while she was out for just 20 minutes. Books reorganized alphabetically, dishes cleaned and put away differently, toilet paper folded into perfect triangles like expensive hotels. Someone with keys was entering regularly, making subtle changes to drive her insane or send a message. The final weeks revealed her growing desperation. She'd installed her own cameras, changed the locks twice, even slept in her car some nights. But the watcher adapted to every precaution. The girl wrote about receiving packages she hadn't ordered, clothes in her exact size, personal items that matched her preferences perfectly, gifts that suggested intimate knowledge of her habits and desires. Her last coherent entry mentioned meeting someone who claimed to help women disappear safely. A network of people who specialized in creating new identities for those being stalked or threatened. She'd grown suspicious of everyone, neighbors, coworkers, even family members. The offer seemed like salvation, but something about the helper made her uncomfortable. Too many personal questions, too much interest in her daily routines. The final page was mostly illegible, ink smeared as if written in tears or rain. Only fragments remained readable. They know I know, and replacement ready, and same face different person. The last clear sentence chilled me. If someone finds this, don't trust anyone who says they're helping. I checked the closet wall again that evening. The scratches seemed deeper somehow, more pronounced in the lamplight. When I pressed my ear against the wood, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Muffled sounds like someone trying to speak through duct tape. Rhythmic tapping that could have been Morse code or simply desperate communication attempts. The police report had been filed, I discovered after visiting the precinct, but key pages were missing from the file. The investigating officer had transferred to another department shortly after closing the case. His replacement knew nothing about the missing girl, claimed no records existed of her ever living at my address. Even the landlord's rental history had been altered to remove her name completely. I found myself adopting her paranoid habits, checking locks multiple times, documenting every small change in my apartment, installing security cameras and checking them obsessively. The watchers, if they existed, were patient. Weeks passed without incident, but I felt their presence like static electricity before a storm. Then I discovered the girl's social media accounts were still active. Someone was posting photos of daily activities, coffee shops, grocery stores, walks in parks I recognized from my own neighborhood. The pictures showed a woman who looked exactly like the girl from the identification card I'd found tucked in the diary's back cover. Same face, same clothes, same mannerisms. But something felt wrong about the images, artificial somehow, like elaborate digital manipulations or carefully coached performances. The final piece of evidence appeared in my mailbox without warning, an envelope containing a single photograph, the girl standing in my apartment, wearing clothes I'd never seen, smiling at a camera positioned exactly where I now sat reading her diary. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 days ago. That night the knocking returned, not from the closet this time, but from every wall in sequence, as if someone was moving through hidden passages surrounding my living space. The sounds continued until dawn, methodical and patient, like a predator circling its prey. By morning, I understood what the girl had meant about being replaced. I'm writing this down because someone needs to know the truth. The girl didn't disappear. She was simply traded for someone who looked exactly like her but served different purposes, and now they're preparing to do the same to me. The Watchers are recruiting my replacement, studying my habits, learning my patterns. Soon there will be another identical person living my life while I join the girl behind the walls, tapping desperately for help that will never come. The knocking has started again. This time it's coming from inside the closet. I think I know who's waiting back there. Crime 8, helping my cousin clean out abandoned storage units, was supposed to be easy cash. Most were junk, until we opened the one at the end of the row. Inside were mannequins, dozens of them, but they were off, skin too smooth, joints too flexible. One even had fingerprints and hair, real hair. We backed out and called the police, but when they arrived, the unit was empty. They accused us of lying, but I still have the photo I took before they came. It shows one mannequin closer to the door than I remembered, and behind it something was moving. The smell hit me first when we rolled up that metal door, not the musty staleness you'd expect from a storage unit that hadn't been opened in months. This was different, sweet, almost floral, but with something underneath that made my stomach turn. My cousin stepped back, covering his nose with his sleeve, but I stayed put, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The mannequins were arranged like a crowd frozen in conversation. Some standing, others seated on boxes, a few leaning against the walls with their arms crossed. Their faces were turned toward each other as if they'd been caught mid-sentence when someone hit pause on their lives. The detail was extraordinary. Pores visible on their skin, tiny lines around their eyes, even what looked like freckles scattered across their cheeks. I pulled out my phone and started recording, stepping closer despite every instinct telling me to run. The nearest mannequin was a woman in a blue dress, her hand raised as if she'd been gesturing while speaking. Her fingernails were painted a deep red, and there was a small scar on her knuckle. Real imperfections. Real wear patterns on the fabric where bodies had moved and lived. My cousin was already backing toward our truck, muttering about how this wasn't worth whatever we were getting paid, but I couldn't stop staring. The hair wasn't synthetic. It moved slightly in the breeze from the open door, catching the light like it belonged to someone breathing. I reached out to touch it, then jerked my hand back when I felt warmth. That's when I noticed the positioning. The mannequins near the back were arranged differently than the ones in front, almost like they were trying to hide something or someone. I took another step forward, my phone still recording, when I saw movement in the shadows behind them. Just a shift, barely perceptible, but enough to make my heart stop. I backed out slowly, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my cousin's phone to call the authorities. We waited in the truck, engines running, both of us staring at that open storage unit like it might explode. Neither of us spoke about what we'd seen, but we both knew something was fundamentally wrong with those figures. The police arrived within the hour. 2 officers, routine and professional, asking the standard questions about abandoned property and suspicious circumstances. I explained about the mannequins, about how realistic they looked, about the movement I'd seen. One officer raised an eyebrow, the other just looked tired. They approached the unit with flashlights, even though it was still daylight. I watched from behind their patrol car as they stepped inside, their voices echoing off the metal walls. After a few minutes, they came back out, expressions unchanged. Empty, they said, nothing but dust and cobwebs. Old boxes in the corner, but no mannequins, no evidence of recent activity. They suggested we might have gotten confused about which unit we'd opened, or perhaps someone had already cleared it out before we arrived. But I had the video on my phone, except when I went to show them, the file was corrupted. A black screen with audio that sounded like static mixed with something that might have been breathing. The officers exchanged glances, the kind that said they'd dealt with attention seekers before. After they left, I sat in the truck going through my phone, trying to recover that footage. I found one image that had saved to my camera roll before the video file corrupted. In it, you can see the mannequins clearly. The woman in blue is there, her hand raised, her red nails visible, but she's standing closer to the door than I remembered positioning myself to film her. I've enlarged that photo countless times, studying every pixel. In the background, behind the carefully arranged figures, there's a shadow that doesn't match any of the mannequins. It's too tall, too fluid, like someone was standing there watching me record them. The storage facility manager claimed no one had rented that unit in over a year. The previous tenant had defaulted on payments and never retrieved their belongings. He had no record of what those belongings were, just that the unit had been sealed and scheduled for auction. I drove back there a week later, alone this time. The unit was locked again, a new padlock that looked like it had never been opened. Through the gap under the door, I could smell that same sweet floral scent, but stronger now, like whatever was producing it had multiplied. The manager avoided eye contact when I asked about accessing the unit again. He mumbled something about insurance liability and walked away quickly, his keys jingling as he disappeared into his office. I noticed his hands were shaking. I still have nightmares about those faces. Not because they were grotesque or obviously artificial, but because they looked so real, so human, so much like people I might pass on the street without a second glance. Sometimes I wake up convinced I saw one of them at the grocery store or standing at a bus stop, perfectly still among the moving crowd. The photo remains on my phone, a reminder that what I saw was real, even if no one believes me. But every time I look at it, I notice something new, a detail that wasn't there before or was there but I'd missed it. Most recently, I swear I can see breath fogging slightly in front of the woman in blue's lips. My cousin won't talk about that morning anymore. When I bring it up, he changes the subject or finds a reason to leave the room. But sometimes I catch him staring at nothing, his face pale, like he's seeing something the rest of us can't. The storage facility closed down last month. A fire, they said, though the building looked perfectly intact when I drove by. The sign just said permanently closed with no explanation, no forwarding information. The manager's office was empty, papers scattered on the floor like someone had left in a hurry. I keep wondering about those mannequins. Where they came from, where they went, and why someone would create replicas so perfect they could fool you into thinking they were sleeping rather than lifeless. But mostly I wonder about that movement I saw in the shadows behind them, and whether what I witnessed was an ending or a beginning. Crime 9, on a road trip I followed the GPS to a shortcut through the woods. It seemed strange, but I trusted the route. The pavement turned to gravel, then to dirt, trees thickened. Finally, I reached a small town that wasn't on any map. The gas station was open but empty. The diner had food on the tables, still warm, but not a single person. As I drove out, my car stalled. The GPS rerouted, same town again. No matter what direction I turned, I came back. Eventually, I parked and walked. At the edge of the woods, I found a sign, "Welcome back." That was 6 months ago, and I've been investigating what happened to me ever since. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about missing persons cases and small town secrets. The first thing I did when I got home was search every database I could find. No record of that town existed anywhere, but something nagged at me. The diner's coffee cups still had lipstick marks. The gas station's register was open, cash scattered but not stolen. Someone had been there recently, maybe even watched me from the shadows. I started with missing persons reports from the surrounding counties. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in darkness. Over the past decade, 17 people had vanished along that same stretch of highway. All were traveling alone. All had taken what they described as GPS shortcuts. None were ever found. Police files were thin, almost deliberately so. Each case was closed within weeks, marked as probable accidents or voluntary disappearances. But the families I spoke with painted a different picture. They described loved ones who never took risks, who always called home, who had no reason to vanish. One mother showed me text messages from her daughter, sent just before she disappeared. Taking a shortcut looks weird, but GPS says it's faster. That was the last anyone heard from her. I drove back to that highway 3 times, trying to retrace my route. Each time my GPS showed only the main road. No shortcuts, no alternate routes. It was as if that path had been erased from every digital map except in my memory. But physical evidence doesn't lie. I found tire tracks leading into the woods, multiple sets, some weathered by seasons, others more recent. The breakthrough came when I contacted a retired state trooper who had worked these disappearances. We met at a diner 50 miles from where I'd gotten lost. His hands shook as he slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs, witness statements, and reports that had never been filed officially. He'd been building his own case for years. "The department told me to drop it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Said I was seeing patterns that weren't there, but I knew better. This thing, whatever it is, it's been happening for longer than anyone wants to admit." The photographs showed the same town I'd encountered, but taken at different times. In some there were people, normal-looking residents going about their daily lives. In others, the streets were empty, just like when I'd been there. The dates on the photos spanned decades. Same buildings, same layout, but the people came and went like actors in a play. The most disturbing discovery was a journal, recovered from the car of one of the missing persons. The final entries described being trapped in a town that reset itself every few days. The same conversations, the same meals left on tables, the same welcoming smiles from residents who seemed to forget meeting you before. The writer had managed to hide the journal in his car before disappearing completely. I began mapping the disappearances more carefully. They clustered around certain dates, always during new moon phases when the nights were darkest. The GPS shortcuts only appeared to certain types of drivers, those traveling alone, those already feeling isolated or vulnerable. It was as if something was selecting its visitors. The retired trooper introduced me to others who had experienced similar encounters but managed to escape. A truck driver who swore he'd delivered supplies to that town for years before realizing his delivery records showed no such place. A woman whose elderly father claimed to have grown up there, though birth records showed he was born elsewhere. Each story added another layer to the mystery, but also more questions. What haunted me most was the sign I'd seen, "Welcome back," not welcome, but welcome back, as if I'd been there before. I started having dreams about walking those empty streets as a child, playing in a schoolyard that should have been abandoned, waving goodbye to parents I couldn't quite remember. The dreams felt too real to be imagination. I hired a private investigator to dig into my own past. The results were unsettling. There was a 3-day gap in my childhood records when I was 7 years old. My parents had reported me missing, then found, with no explanation of where I'd been. When I confronted them, they claimed I'd been sick with fever, delirious, talking about a town in the woods where everyone was always happy. The investigation led me to a defunct logging company that had owned vast tracts of land in that area. Their records showed a company town, established in the 1940s, abandoned in the 1960s after a series of unexplained incidents. Workers had reported strange occurrences, people going missing only to return days later with no memory of being gone. The company had buried the reports, eventually selling the land to the state with restrictions on development. I found one surviving former resident in a nursing home. She was 93, her mind sharp despite her age. When I mentioned the town, her eyes widened with recognition and fear. She told me about the experiments, government men in suits who came in the late 1950s, promising to help the community grow and prosper. After they arrived, people started changing, forgetting things, reliving the same days over and over. They were testing something, she whispered, gripping my hand with surprising strength. Something about memory, about making people forget, but it went wrong. The town became stuck, like a record with a skip. Some folks got out, but others, they're still there, living the same day forever. The more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't just about missing persons. It was about a cover-up spanning decades, a failed experiment that had created something unnatural, a place where time itself had become corrupted. The GPS shortcuts weren't random glitches, they were invitations, drawing people back to a town that existed in a loop, feeding off visitors to maintain its strange existence. I've documented everything, stored copies with multiple sources, prepared for the possibility that someone might try to silence this investigation. Because I know now why that sign said, "Welcome back." I wasn't just a random traveler who stumbled onto something unusual. I was one of the original test subjects, a child who had escaped but never fully left. The town is still there, still waiting. My GPS sometimes shows that shortcut again, late at night when I'm driving alone. Part of me wants to take it, to finally understand what happened to me all those years ago. But I've seen what happens to people who go back. They become part of the loop, living the same day over and over, serving food that never spoils, welcoming visitors who might never leave. The case remains open in my files, but officially it doesn't exist. The missing persons have been forgotten, their families told to move on. The town continues to exist in its bubble of fractured time, and somewhere in those empty streets, 17 people are still living out their last day, waiting for someone to finally free them from their endless loop. I carry the weight of knowing, of being the one who escaped but couldn't save the others. Every time I see a missing person report, I wonder if they took a GPS shortcut through the woods, if they found a town that shouldn't exist, if they're still there, setting the same tables, pumping the same gas, waiting for visitors who might never come home. Story 10. The worn wooden plank shifted beneath her weight, a subtle movement that drew her focus. Bending down, she traced the edges of the loose board with delicate fingers, sensing a hidden void beneath the seemingly solid floor. Curiosity piqued. She carefully pried up the boards, unveiling a shadowy, cramped space concealed beneath her new dwelling. Dust motes danced in the dim light, cobwebs clinging to forgotten corners. Yet as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, shapes emerged from the gloom: a mattress, a solitary chair, and nestled in a corner, a weathered notebook filled with haunting repetitions of a name, her own. Detective Morgan Reed stood silently behind Sarah Coleman, observing the tremor of fear in her gaze as she peered into the abyss beneath her home. It wasn't just the discovery of a hidden chamber that unsettled Sarah. It was the violation of her sanctuary, the intrusion of a sinister presence into what should have been a fresh beginning. "Don't disturb anything." Detective Reed's voice was steady, a beacon of calm amidst the creeping unease. With a click, her flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing walls plastered with surveillance photographs, snapshots of Sarah's daily life, captured in eerie detail. A twisted shrine to obsession that had lurked beneath her very feet, unbeknownst to her. The quaint cottage had been acquired from the estate of Walter Green, an elderly recluse who passed away without kin. Vacant for months before Sarah's purchase, the property had seemed nothing more than a charming fixer-upper, with no hint of the hidden horrors lying in wait. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah's voice wavered. "The neighbors claimed he kept to himself, and the basement access was supposed to be sealed off long ago, according to the inspection report." As crime scene investigators filed in, their footsteps muffled by the wooden floors, they meticulously documented the eerie chamber, extracting the mattress, chair, and the unsettling notebook. Forensic analysis unveiled a plethora of fingerprints belonging solely to Walter Green, a chilling testament to his clandestine obsession. What troubled the investigators most was the timeline. They unearthed evidence pointed to Walter surveilling Sarah for years before his demise, shadowing her every move without her knowledge. In a grim briefing, the department psychologist shed light on Walter's escalating fixation. From fantasy to planning, the trajectory indicated a chilling intent lurking beneath the surface. Reed's investigation took a chilling turn when a former coworker of Walter's revealed cryptic references the deceased man had made about Sarah. A key discovered in Walter's workplace locker led to a storage unit, unveiling a replica of Sarah's former life, a grotesque imitation meticulously recreated by her unseen stalker. Institutionalized in his youth for a prior fixation, Walter's delusions of a destined union with Sarah had festered over time, culminating in a plan that never came to fruition. The case, branded stalking with intent to abduct, remained unsolved, leaving Sarah to grapple with the chilling reality of how close she had come to a nightmarish fate. Taking solace in a fresh start far from the haunting cottage, she sought refuge in anonymity, forever changed by the specter of the unseen predator who had lurked beneath her floorboards. The cottage passed into new hands, oblivious to its dark past. The hidden chamber was sealed, the echoes of a twisted obsession buried beneath layers of fresh floorboards. Life flowed onward, casting a veil over the chilling tale of the hidden room, a cautionary whisper of the dangers that linger unseen, the monsters who vanish before they are unmasked, and the victims who remain unaware of the peril that once stalked them in the shadows of their own homes. Story 11. In the quiet of the night, a mysterious package arrived, carried by the hands of the unseen. Wrapped in a plain envelope devoid of any return address, it held a single brass key, weathered by the passage of time. The homeowner, a soul named Sarah Miller, felt a strange familiarity with the key, though its origin remained a shadowed mystery. As the key glided into each lock she possessed, not a single one yielded to its touch. It was a key without a home, without a purpose in her world. Yet when placed upon the coffee table, an ancient grandfather clock in the hallway stirred from its slumber, letting out a solitary, haunting chime, a sound long forgotten, for the clock had been silent for years. Sarah, unsettled by this inexplicable occurrence, sought solace in the arms of authority. The tale of the mysterious key unfolded before the bewildered eyes of the suburban neighborhood, casting a veil of unease over its once tranquil streets. The initial response from the officer who answered her call was one of dismissal, attributing the key's arrival to a simple mistake. But Sarah's intuition whispered of darker truths lurking in the shadows. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, unaware of the storm it would unleash upon their world. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the hidden depths of seemingly innocuous beginnings, found himself drawn into the enigma of the brass key. It sat upon his desk, an unassuming artifact that held within its aged metal a tale of unspeakable horrors. Background checks painted Sarah as a canvas of innocence. No stains of criminality marred her past. A widow and retired teacher, her life seemed ordinary, her soul untainted by the darkness that now encroached upon her existence. The forensic team's search for clues bore no fruit, save for Sarah's fingerprints upon the key. The envelope whispered no secrets, bearing only a generic postmark from a distant distribution center. The key itself, a mere Schlage standard, bore the scars of time and wear, hinting at a past shrouded in mystery. A breakthrough came when Detective Harmon delved into the key's unique pattern, unearthing a connection to a cold case from the annals of time. A storage unit, a chamber of horrors, a forgotten chapter in the Book of Nightmares. Blood-stained carpets, cutting tools, and images of women lost to the shadows, all tied to an identical key from a past long buried. The ghost of Harold Jenkins, a specter from the shadows, danced upon the stage of the investigation. A man of quiet demeanor, of unremarkable existence, yet harboring within him the seeds of unspeakable darkness. As the tendrils of the investigation stretched further, a chilling truth emerged from the depths of the past. A hidden room beneath the floorboards of a cabin, a chamber of keys bearing names and dates, a grim ledger of lives extinguished. Sarah, now a beacon in the storm of darkness, found herself at the center of a deadly game orchestrated by a predator lurking in plain sight. The man known as Jenkins, the keymaster, had chosen her as a recipient of his macabre legacy. The hunt for Jenkins spanned the nation, a race against time to prevent further tragedy. The wilderness echoed with the footsteps of those seeking justice, the shadows concealing the fugitive from the light of retribution. In a final act of defiance, Jenkins chose the path of darkness, leaving behind a journal of horrors and a single brass key, a mirror image of the one that had set the wheels of fate in motion. The truth, a bitter pill to swallow, revealed a tapestry of 32 lives lost to the abyss, their stories now etched in the annals of tragedy. Families found closure in the wake of devastation, their hearts heavy with the burden of knowing the fate that had befallen their loved ones. Sarah, a survivor of the darkness, found herself adrift in a sea of shadows, unable to return to the sanctuary of her home. The grandfather clock, once a sentinel of time, now a harbinger of dread, bore witness to the intrusion of evil into the realm of the ordinary. As the keys lay silent in their chamber of secrets, a testament to the lives they once symbolized, the world grappled with the knowledge that monsters can wear the mask of the mundane, lurking in the shadows of the everyday, waiting to unlock the horrors that dwell within. Story 12. The ancient library stood on the brink of destruction. The workers labored tirelessly, their efforts nearing completion, when a serendipitous stumble unveiled a concealed latch nestled within a dusty bookshelf. With a gentle click, the entire structure swung open, unveiling a clandestine passage leading to a secluded chamber. The air within was heavy, stagnant with the weight of time. Devoid of furniture, save for a solitary chair bolted to the floor, the room exuded an eerie stillness. Etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting message echoed, "I am still here." The construction foreman swiftly contacted the authorities. What had commenced as a routine demolition swiftly spiraled into a realm of darkness and intrigue. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, found himself confronted with a scene unlike any he had encountered before. Standing at the threshold, his flashlight pierced the shadows, illuminating the chilling inscription that adorned the walls. "Incident secured," Walsh commanded, his voice resonating within the confined space. "No tampering until forensics arrives." The library's history painted a compelling backdrop to the unfolding mystery. Once owned by the esteemed Harrington family, the building had been bequeathed to the public following the mysterious vanishing of their daughter, Rebecca. Her disappearance during her final year of college left behind a void shrouded in enigma. Despite extensive searches and inquiries, she had seemingly vanished without a trace, save for her abandoned car discovered near the woods. As forensic specialists meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they unearthed hair and fiber remnants embedded within the chair. The scratches on the walls harbored faint traces of blood and skin cells beneath layers of neglect. Preliminary analyses hinted at the biological material belonging to a young female, a grim revelation of past struggles. Walsh marshaled a team to delve into the enigmatic history of the Harrington lineage. The timing of the library's donation after Rebecca's disappearance gnawed at him an inexplicable coincidence that now bore the weight of significance. Further probing unearthed a disquieting detail. The bookshelf concealing the secret chamber had been installed by a contractor exclusively hired by Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family's patriarch. Financial records disclosed exorbitant payments to the contractor, surpassing standard renovation expenses. Former library staff, interviewed amidst the unfolding drama, expressed astonishment at the revelation. None had been privy to the hidden space, except for an elderly librarian who recalled Maxwell's solitary sojourns in that section of the edifice after hours. Maxwell was adamant about preserving that area untouched, she recounted to the investigators. He insisted upon its historical significance and irreplaceable essence. The investigation delved deeper as DNA testing confirmed the genetic material from the hidden room corresponded to samples derived from Rebecca's personal effects. The chilling truth began to crystallize. Rebecca had not fled, but had been imprisoned behind the bookshelf, possibly by a member of her own kin. Armed with a warrant, detectives scoured the Harrington estate. In Maxwell's sanctum, a hidden journal concealed within a secret compartment unfurled a tale of obsession and malevolence. Detailed entries chronicled months of fixation on his niece, culminating in a bone-chilling resolve. She threatened exposure. "I cannot permit it. The chamber shall confine her until enlightenment dawns." Maxwell, now residing in a coastal haven for retirees, faced intense interrogation. Initially composed, he disavowed knowledge of the hidden room, dismissing it as a mere architectural anomaly. However, when confronted with the incriminating journal and DNA evidence, his fa-ide crumbled. "She imperiled everything," he confessed tonelessly. "Rebecca stumbled upon incriminating documents exposing my embezzlement from the family foundation. The family's reputation was paramount. I could not allow her to tarnish it." The truth unraveled in all its macabre hues. Maxwell had lured Rebecca to the library, subdued her, and ensnared her within the concealed chamber. His intent had been to confine her until compliance, but events took a fatal turn. In a moment of desperation, Rebecca had sought to break free, triggering a fatal altercation. "Panic consumed me," Maxwell revealed in his recorded admission. "I interred her beneath the chamber's floorboards and sealed it off. The donation of the building was to ensure perpetual concealment. Ground-penetrating technology confirmed the presence of human remains beneath the chamber's flooring. The subsequent excavation unearthed Rebecca's skeletal remains, adorned with the silver bracelet gifted by her parents on her 20th birthday. The Harrington family stood witness at Maxwell's sentencing, a silent testament to the long-awaited dispensation of justice. Clutching her daughter's salvaged bracelet, Rebecca's mother found solace, a final relic to lay her beloved child to rest. The halt to the library's demolition transmuted it into a site of reverence and lamentation. Locals laid flowers at its entrance, honoring a life cut short and a truth concealed behind a veil of shadows. In a cruel irony, Rebecca's poignant message etched on the walls, "I am still here," ensured her eternal remembrance and heralded the belated arrival of justice into the realm of light. Story 13. The ancient apartment held secrets within its walls, pipes that whispered, floorboards that murmured. Yet the new occupant sensed something amiss in the eerie symphony of sounds. The footsteps were too deliberate, too precise, echoing from above in a haunting rhythm. Strangely, she resided on the topmost floor of the building. One fateful night, she summoned the courage to tap the ceiling with a broomstick. The sound abruptly ceased, plunging the space into a profound stillness. Then a solitary knock reverberated from within the ceiling itself. Sarah Coleman chose to keep the peculiar knocking to herself, attributing it to the settling of the old building, or perhaps a critter wandering into the hidden spaces above. As the footsteps persisted, a nightly ritual of methodical pacing above her head, she adapted by raising the volume of her television, donning headphones to muffle the unsettling footfalls traversing her ceiling in the shroud of darkness. Detective Morris became entangled in the unsettling tale when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs. While fixing a leak in the hallway outside Sarah's unit, the worker unearthed a narrow passage that defied the building's architectural plans. Illuminated by his flashlight, the hidden space unveiled a makeshift living area, scattered food wrappers, discarded water bottles, a soiled blanket, and a weathered notebook. Alarmed, the building superintendent alerted the authorities. Detective Morris, accompanied by his partner Detective Rivera, encountered the petrified maintenance worker who kept muttering, "Someone dwells within the walls, someone watches." The notebook chronicled intricate observations of Sarah Coleman, her daily routine, her guests, her meals, her entertainment choices, even her moments of rest. The once methodical handwriting spiraled into chaotic scrawls on the final pages, adorned with cryptic symbols. "The subject ignores my signals now," the ultimate entry lamented. "She has chosen to disregard me. No one ignores me." Forensic experts meticulously combed the crawlspace, unearthing fingerprints that eluded identification in any database. A complex network of passages interwoven into the walls and ceilings of the building, some dating back decades, was uncovered. These concealed pathways linked to 5 different units, terminating in observation points disguised as innocuous fixtures or subtle imperfections, yet only one led to Sarah Coleman's apartment. Interviews with current residents yielded no extraordinary occurrences beyond the typical sounds of communal living. Former tenants, however, revealed a different narrative. 3 predecessors of Sarah recounted sensations of being surveilled or hearing inexplicable movements. One had vacated after a mere fortnight, their experiences left unvoiced out of fear of sounding paranoid. The puzzle began to unravel when forensic analysis pinpointed microscopic blood traces in one of the concealed spaces. DNA testing identified the blood as belonging to Martin Weaver, a past resident who had vanished mysteriously 4 years prior. His disappearance had gone unsolved, despite his family filing a missing person report. Martin had inhabited the unit directly beneath Sarah's. Revisiting Martin's enigma, Detective Morris uncovered accounts from neighbors detailing Martin's grievances about noises emanating from the apartment above. Confronting the reclusive tenant, Edward, Martin vanished soon thereafter. Edward vanished as well, leaving no forwarding details. A pattern emerged as investigators traced Edward's history of residing in 6 different buildings over 2 decades. Secluded on the topmost floors, he shunned social connections and departed unannounced. A neighbor from Edward's third abode recalled him as intense, fixated on the necessity of silence. Property records led the investigators to a secluded cabin, adorned with unsettling decor. Walls adorned with photographs and notes, maps outlining ventilation systems and structural vulnerabilities, and detailed journals chronicling observations of the specimens and preserving the environment. At the cabin's heart, a corkboard displayed newspaper clippings, missing persons reports, 6 in total, all linked to Edward's former residences. Cadaver dogs guided the team to a disturbed patch of earth behind the cabin, unearthing human remains concealed beneath the soil. As forensic anthropologists toiled to identify the victims, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's building. Though the crawl spaces had been sealed, residents reported intermittent noises. During the installation of enhanced security measures, a startling discovery emerged: a newer notebook nestled in a corner where the ceiling met the wall. The initial page bore a single chilling sentence: "They found my old refuge, but not my new one." The handwriting mirrored the previous notebook, culminating in a sketch of Sarah's apartment layout with a crimson-marked passage and a date for that very night. Rushing to evacuate Sarah, law enforcement found her dwelling deserted. Her phone lay dormant on the counter, the television murmuring softly. The shower continued its monotonous cascade. Within the misted bathroom mirror materialized a message, etched by a finger: "Look up." The ceiling panel above the shower had been displaced, unraveling a sinister truth. The pursuit of Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction specialist in renovations, persists. His adept knowledge of building intricacies facilitated the creation of a covert network of observation points and passageways. Thermal scans of Sarah's residence unveiled no signs of current occupancy within the walls. Sarah Coleman remains absent, her case entwined with vanishing acts spanning multiple states. Authorities have cautioned apartment complexes about unauthorized alterations and concealed spaces. Yet what haunts Detective Morris is not the graves, the journals, or the photographs of unwitting residents. It is the image of Sarah, haunted by the relentless footfalls above her, in an apartment devoid of an upper level. The footsteps that ceased when she knocked, only to echo back. Sometimes, amidst nocturnal solitude, Detective Morris finds himself gazing upward at his own ceiling, attuned to the silence, waiting, and pondering who else may be listening in the shadows. Story 14. Once upon a time, there was a woman preparing for the arrival of her baby. She decided to repaint the nursery, tired of the faded blue walls that seemed to hold secrets of the past within their layers. As she applied the first coat of fresh white paint, something unexpected was unveiled, a message hidden beneath the surface. At first, the letters were faint, almost imperceptible, but as she continued painting, they became sharper and clearer. The message simply read, "Don't let it hear you." A shiver ran down her spine, and when she took a step back, her eyes widened in shock. There, imprinted in the wet paint, were tiny handprints, too high on the wall to belong to any child. This discovery marked the beginning of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The couple had purchased the Victorian-style home for a surprisingly low price, unaware of the dark history that lurked within its walls. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the residence, notebook in hand, to investigate the mysterious occurrences. A pregnant woman greeted her at the door, her tired eyes betraying her lack of sleep. She recounted finding the message and handprints, revealing that the previous owners had left abruptly, without a trace, in the dead of night. Walking through the creaking halls of the historic house, Detective Klein reached the nursery, where the unsettling message and handprints still lingered on the wall. Delving into the property's records at the precinct, she uncovered a disturbing pattern of short-lived ownership and troubling reports from past families, especially those with children. The house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a widow who ran an orphanage from the premises many years ago. 5 children had vanished under her care, their fate a mystery until now. Forensic analysis, interviews with former residents, and ground-penetrating radar revealed a chilling truth buried beneath the basement floor: 5 small sets of remains, confirming the tragic end of the orphans who had disappeared long ago. Further investigation illuminated Eleanor's twisted motives, her belief in harnessing the life force of orphaned children to prolong her own existence. As the case unfolded, the nursery walls glowed with hidden handprints under the luminol, a silent testament to the horrors that had transpired within those walls. The house, tainted by its grim past, stood empty and condemned, its secrets buried but not forgotten. Detective Klein closed the case, but a lingering presence persisted, a spectral echo of the innocent souls who had met their untimely end. And so the house remained a spectral enigma, a cold case shrouded in unanswered questions, a reminder that some crimes leave indelible marks that no amount of fresh paint can erase. The photograph of the glowing handprints served as a haunting memento of the past, a solemn tribute to the children who whispered from beyond the veil of time. Story 15, the aged apartment exuded an air of antiquity, its heating system emitting low groans and the pipes rattling with a familiar rhythm that echoed through the halls. To its inhabitants, these sounds were routine, easily dismissed as part of the building's character. But one resident, a young woman, began to sense a difference. It started as a whisper, barely audible, drifting through the vents like a ghostly murmur. She hesitated, uncertain, her heart quickening at the eerie sensation of being called. Leaning closer to the metal grate, a chill breeze brushed against her cheek, carrying with it a soft, almost playful voice that whispered, "I know you're listening." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the stillness of the empty apartment, her gaze fixed on the rusted vent cover that had been forcibly removed. Around her, the forensics team moved with precision, capturing every detail with their cameras. The missing woman, Eleanor Reeves, had vanished without a trace until the discovery of her remains within the ventilation system. Officer Patel recited the details from his notes, revealing Eleanor's reports of hearing voices, dismissed by the building management as mere quirks of an aging building. Kneeling by the vent, Shaw observed the frantic scratch marks, evidence of a desperate attempt to escape from within. The victim, a beloved kindergarten teacher, had exhibited signs of paranoia in the days leading up to her disappearance. Her sister recounted Eleanor's fears of being watched, of voices speaking through the vents, attributing it to stress from work. Shaw surveyed the apartment, noticing the meticulous bed, the neglected coffee mug, and the chair positioned beneath the vent, as though someone had been there, listening intently. As the investigation unfolded, unsettling revelations came to light. Fibers from Eleanor's clothing were found in the vent, a foreign fingerprint on the inside of the cover, and haunting audio recordings on her phone. Shaw listened to Eleanor's voice, trembling with fear, seeking validation from an unseen presence that whispered back with chilling familiarity. Delving into the building's history, Shaw uncovered a pattern of former tenants leaving abruptly, citing strange occurrences within the walls. The superintendent, Harold Weber, appeared cooperative but evasive, his demeanor shifting when questioned about apartment 4. A hidden access panel in Aliner's bathroom led to a maintenance passage where evidence of someone living in the walls emerged, watching, listening, whispering. A search of Weber's apartment uncovered a disturbing collection of recordings and personal effects belonging to past tenants. His meticulously organized files detailed his obsession with Aliner and others, culminating in a chilling plan to invite them into the walls with him. Arrested and unflinching, Weber confessed to his twisted connection with the building, claiming he was the conduit for the voices that haunted its residents. The truth of Aliner's fate came to light, sedated and coerced into the ventilation system, guided by false promises of sanctuary within the building's confines. Families of previous victims stepped forward, sharing their own experiences of paranoia and loss, painting a harrowing portrait of a predator hidden in plain sight. Weber's trial unfolded with a surreal calmness, his defense of insanity countered by evidence of calculated manipulation and control. The jury's swift verdict sealed his fate, but his parting words to Shaw echoed with a chilling certainty the whispers would endure, the building retaining its dark memories. Now the once vacant apartment building stands as a somber monument to its tainted history. Despite efforts at renewal, whispers linger in the walls, a reminder of the haunting legacy left behind. The heating system groans, the pipes rattle, and residents, new and old, grapple with the unsettling presence that dwells within. It's a mystery they dare not unravel, a secret they choose to ignore, as the building whispers its tales of the past into the shadows of the night. Story 16, the apartment lay dormant for months, untouched by life. Its new occupants had modest expectations upon moving in, perhaps a layer of dust, maybe a few forsaken remnants of the past. Yet a single door refused to yield to their efforts. It stood there, an enigmatic barrier locked from within. The landlord, with trepidation in his eyes, eventually pried it open, anticipating mundane contents within. But what they discovered was far from ordinary. The walls bore witness to a haunting tale, etched with deep, jagged scratches that spoke of desperation and confinement. In the shadowed corner, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its screen illuminated by a solitary, unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned by the grim sights of her profession, felt a chill creep down her spine at the scene. It wasn't the presence of blood or overt violence that unsettled her, but rather the silent plea conveyed by those marks, a silent testimony of someone trapped, struggling against unseen forces. "We need forensics here immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently documented the eerie scratches. "And fetch me the records of the previous tenants." The enigmatic message on the forgotten phone simply stated, "I know what you did." The fidgety landlord nervously divulged that the previous tenant, a reticent young woman named Emma Caldwell, had vacated the premises abruptly, leaving behind unpaid rent. She was quiet, kept to herself. "Left around 6 months back," he muttered, his gaze skirting the closet. "Never caused any trouble." Forensic analysis uncovered multiple DNA samples mingled with the blood embedded in the wall gashes. Most matched Emma Caldwell, aged 28, reported missing after her sudden disappearance. However, 2 distinct samples baffled the investigators. One remained unidentifiable in the database, while the other belonged to an individual presumed deceased for 2 years. "This defies logic," Shaw mused, scrutinizing the perplexing findings. Emma's abode bore signs of an interrupted existence: neglected mail, a lone coffee mug left unwashed, and a meticulously made bed. Her phone records hinted at a narrative frequent calls to her sister, abruptly terminated, and a flurry of unanswered calls from an unknown number preceding her vanishing act. The sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Officer Reed relayed. No name given, just described as intense and private. Surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store captured Emma's return to her abode one fateful night, trailed by a man in a cap, carefully evading the cameras. The puzzle pieces began to align when partial fingerprints belonging to Derek Mercer, a supposed deceased individual, were discovered on the closet's inner doorknob. He staged his death, Shaw deduced. The question remains why and what ties him to Emma. The enigmatic DNA sample led the investigators to another missing persons file, Lynette Porter, who had vanished 3 years earlier. Her trail had grown cold until her description matched that of a woman seen frequenting Emma's residence. Shaw connected the dots while scrutinizing traffic camera footage, tracing a car linked to Derek Mercer's mother loitering near Emma's building, with a driver matching Derek's physical features. The pursuit culminated in a desolate property belonging to the Mercer family, unveiling a grim reality behind heavy cellar doors. There, Lynette Porter was discovered alive but emaciated, confined in a harrowing setup reminiscent of Emma's entrapment. "He forced me to witness," she murmured, her eyes vacant. "Said I needed to learn the fate of those who dared to flee." Evidence amassed, journals chronicling Mercer's fixation on dominance, photographs of women resembling Emma and Lynette, and incriminating video footage of Mercer coercing Emma into the closet. "She thought she could expose me," his voice echoed in the recordings. "No one reveals my truths." The hunt for Derek Mercer spanned across jurisdictions, while forensic profilers painted a portrait of a chilling psyche. Mercer didn't merely seek to end lives, he craved the torment of witnessing hope wither away in confined spaces. Upon his apprehension at a bus depot, Mercer clutched a fresh identity and a passage to an ocean-bound destination, with a backpack containing sinister tools, a roll of duct tape, a hunting knife, and a news clipping detailing Emma's disappearance. During interrogation, Mercer exuded an eerie calmness, asserting she penned that message herself, referencing the cryptic phone missive. She yearned for someone to unveil her, but she wasn't worthy of salvation. The ensuing trial unveiled the elaborate charade Mercer orchestrated to feign his demise, exploiting dental records of a vagrant resembling him. For 2 years, he had eluded scrutiny, preying on women bearing semblance to his initial victim. Emma's remains were never recovered, the forensic clues hinting at a grim demise in that forsaken closet where she scratched in vain against unyielding walls. The jury swiftly rendered a guilty verdict after a brief deliberation, sealing Mercer's fate with a life sentence devoid of parole. As the sentence was pronounced, Mercer's lips curled into a faint smile, as if vindicated by a private rationale known solely to him. At the sentencing, Lynette Porter faced the court. "He ensnared us in confined spaces because that's where his soul dwells, entombed in darkness. While he withers in his cell, I shall bask in the sunlight." The case prompted a revamp of departmental procedures for missing persons inquiries, emphasizing scrutiny on relationship dynamics and rental property surveys. Detective Shaw preserved the closet door from Emma's apartment, mounting it as a somber reminder in her office, a testament that the most harrowing crime scenes aren't always drenched in blood, but etched with the poignant marks of a soul battling for survival. Story 17: The Secrets of the Dollhouse. She always avoided the attic, finding it unsettling, but when a storm caused a leak in the roof, she had no choice but to venture up there. The attic was a realm of forgotten treasures, cloaked in layers of dust and spiderwebs. Amidst the shadows, tucked away in the farthest corner, was an old dollhouse, It exuded an eerie aura with its intricate details and meticulously arranged miniature furniture. Yet, as she gazed into its tiny rooms, a sense of unease crept over her. The figures inside were not mere dolls. They were delicate, hand-carved replicas of her own family. Each miniature family member was positioned exactly as they sat in the rooms below, except for one glaring difference. The figure meant to represent her was not seated, but standing by the attic door, staring back at her. Rebecca Morgan tentatively traced her finger along the roof of the dollhouse, feeling the indentation where the tiny wooden figure loomed. A shiver ran down her spine, unrelated to the draft swirling through the rafters. This dollhouse should not have been there. This house was not her childhood abode. It was a rental property her family had recently moved into. The unsettling discovery prompted Rebecca to contact law enforcement in a state of distress. Officers arrived at the suburban dwelling to find a family huddled in fear, refusing to return to the upper floors. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially dismissed their concerns as a possible prank or the result of an unfamiliar house triggering vivid imaginations. However, it was the intricate detail of the dollhouse that caught Detective Harmon's attention. Each tiny figurine captured unique characteristics of the family members: the father's receding hairline, the son's favorite hoodie, even a small birthmark on the mother's hand. The investigation took a chilling turn when forensic analysis revealed fingerprints on the dollhouse belonging to none of the family members. Even more disturbing were the microscopic cameras hidden within the miniature figure's eyes, all linked to a sophisticated recording system concealed beneath the dollhouse. Examination of the family's movements unveiled a disconcerting revelation. The positions of the miniature figures did not merely mirror the family's current whereabouts, but replicated exact postures from various days, suggesting a meticulous observer had studied their habits over time. Detective Harmon realized they were dealing with more than a typical case of stalking. The perpetrator displayed an unprecedented level of obsession. A concealed entrance to a hidden basement was discovered behind a pantry wall, revealing evidence of someone clandestinely residing there before the Morgans' arrival. Food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at a prolonged occupancy beneath the unsuspecting family. The absence of forced entry perplexed investigators, as property records indicated the house had stood vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans moved in. Neighbors provided scant information, except for one elderly woman who sporadically noticed lights in the vacant house. A breakthrough in the case was achieved through digital forensics, tracing the surveillance data to an apartment across town. Inside, walls were adorned with photographs of the Morgan family and the previous occupants, alongside detailed journal entries documenting their daily routines with alarming precision. The most chilling find was a workshop filled with partially constructed dollhouses, each representing different homes in the neighborhood. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the deceased homeowners. Financial records suggested he accrued debts following his parents' demise, leading him to surreptitiously inhabit the house while leasing it out. The forensic psychologist assigned to the case described the dollhouse as Wells' control center, a means of monitoring and possessing the property and its inhabitants. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed, attributing his actions to a desire to ensure the family respected his childhood home. His chilling statement, "I wanted them to know I was always watching," unveiled his possessive delusion. Wells faced multiple charges, including stalking, invasion of privacy, and illegal surveillance. The judge at his sentencing acknowledged the profound violations suffered by the Morgan family, emphasizing the breach of their safety and autonomy. The case prompted a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws regarding property histories and tenant security. The disturbing aspect of the case lay in how long Wells could have remained undetected if not for Rebecca's discovery. His journals hinted at a prolonged pattern of secretly residing in homes, creating miniature replicas of families to observe. Though the Morgan family relocated, Rebecca confessed to lingering fears and a persistent sense of being watched. She removed all dollhouses from their new residence, haunted by the possibility that somewhere a miniature version of her was still being manipulated by unseen eyes. Story 18. The old envelope lay on the detective's desk, its edges tinged with age, yet the stamp fresh, as if it had just embarked on its journey. With cautious hands, Detective Sarah Morgan unfolded the letter enclosed within. The paper felt damp, emitting a faint scent of iron that lingered in the air. Typed in a hurried, uneven font were the words, "I am sorry for what I did." A crimson smear along the bottom edge caught her attention, not ink but blood. Carefully preserving the evidence, Morgan placed the letter in an evidence bag, her gloved fingers moving with practiced precision. The forensics team confirmed her suspicions. The bloodstain matched the DNA from an unsolved homicide case that had haunted the department for years. The victim, Rebecca Warren, a young journalist, had been brutally murdered in her apartment, her notes scattered and her laptop missing. The letter now in their possession, addressed simply to Homicide Division, revealed little in terms of fingerprints, only faint smudges hinting at gloved hands. The postmark, however, provided a crucial lead, breathing new life into the cold case. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room adorned with crime scene photos and suspect profiles, Morgan pinned the letter at the center of the board. "This changes everything," she murmured, her voice a hushed whisper in the stillness. "Our killer feels remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner, studied the letter intently. "Or perhaps it's a facade, a twisted performance to deceive us," he suggested, his words hanging in the air like a veil of uncertainty. The typewriter used to craft the letter bore unique impressions, a relic from a bygone era, rare but not unattainable. As the investigation unraveled, shedding light on Rebecca's relentless pursuit of truth and justice, her inquiries into a wealthy family's dark secrets emerged. The family's patriarch, now deceased, left behind a tangled web of deceit and betrayal, with siblings vying for control over his estate. Suspicion fell on Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, whose demeanor shifted subtly upon the discovery of the blood-stained letters. A second letter arrived, mirroring the first in its macabre contents. The sender's words hinted at a chilling truth that Rebecca's investigation had struck a nerve, delving too deeply into family matters best left buried. A visit to the patriarch's mansion unearthed a trove of damning evidence, leading the detectives to Richard, the eldest son, whose polished facade crumbled under scrutiny. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with the revelation of financial transactions between Richard and Michael, implicating them in a deadly conspiracy. Elinor, the family's youngest daughter, emerged as a key witness, her courage unveiling the sinister plot that had claimed Rebecca's life. Richard's arrest marked the beginning of the end, his denial crumbling under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The trial that followed was a testament to justice prevailing over deceit. Richard's attempts to deflect blame onto Michael were futile in the face of overwhelming proof. As he was escorted away, a sense of closure settled upon the courtroom, a bittersweet solace for Rebecca's grieving parents. The blood-stained letters, now relics of a dark chapter in the department's history, stood as a reminder that even the most meticulous crimes leave traces behind. The case of Rebecca Warren served as a poignant lesson for aspiring detectives, a testament to the power of intuition and the haunting grip of guilt on a killer's soul, unraveling the facade of a seemingly perfect crime in the quiet shadows of the night. Story 19. The tale began innocently enough for Michael and Sarah Klein, the new inhabitants of a Victorian-era home with secrets hidden within its walls. The peeling wallpaper in the master bedroom appeared to be a mere inconvenience at first, but as they delved deeper, they uncovered a haunting mystery that would unravel the very fabric of their reality. Layer by layer, as the wallpaper gave way to reveal the stories etched beneath, a single name emerged: Alina Winters. The name repeated endlessly, etched in ink so dark it seemed to seep into the very soul of the house. It was a name unknown to them, a name that whispered of forgotten truths and unsolved mysteries. Intrigued and unsettled, Sarah traced the name with trembling fingers, her mind swirling with questions. Who was Alina Winters, and why was her name imprinted on the walls of their home? The answers eluded them, driving them to the depths of curiosity and fear. Late nights turned into early mornings as Michael scoured through property records, searching for any trace of Alina Winters. The name yielded no results, except for a single haunting echo from the past, a missing persons case from decades ago. The photograph of the missing woman bore a striking resemblance to the previous owner of their home, Margaret Cavendish. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, painting a chilling portrait of deception and tragedy. Margaret Cavendish, with her silver-streaked dark hair and elegant demeanor, had sold them a house that held more than just memories. It held the echoes of a life lost in the shadows. As they dug deeper, the lines between past and present blurred, unveiling a story of obsession and fractured identities. Alina Winters, the missing woman, became entwined with a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge, whose desperate attempt to cling to reality led to a web of deception that spanned decades. The walls of the house bore witness to the twisted tale, a silent testament to the darkness that lurked within. Forensic teams descended upon the property, unearthing secrets buried deep beneath the surface. The truth, once hidden, now lay exposed, casting a shadow over the once charming residence. Alina's remains were discovered in the backyard, bringing closure to a family long haunted by unanswered questions. Rebecca Eldridge, masquerading as Margaret Cavendish, was apprehended, her fractured mind finally laid bare in the harsh light of justice. For Michael and Sarah, the house they had hoped would be a sanctuary had become a haunting reminder of the frailty of human nature. The walls themselves had spoken, revealing a story of loss and deception that would forever linger in the whispers of the wind. As they watched the authorities carry out the final pieces of the investigation, Michael and Sarah found themselves enveloped in a sense of melancholy peace. The mystery had been solved, the truth unveiled, and the house, once a place of dreams, now stood as a silent monument to the past. And as the night descended upon the old Victorian home, a hush settled over the land, cradling the secrets within its walls and lulling the weary souls to a dreamless sleep, where the echoes of the past whispered softly in the darkness. Story 20. The listing from the realtor made no mention of a basement. The blueprints revealed no trace of it. Yet as the family peeled back the worn carpet in their new home, they uncovered a door concealed beneath. A door adorned with a heavy, rusted handle that resisted their efforts to open it. With combined strength, they finally succeeded. A rush of stale air enveloped them, carrying the musty odor of damp earth. Descending steps beckoned into darkness. Expecting a storage area, they instead encountered a solitary chair illuminated by a swaying light bulb overhead, and on the wall behind the chair, a row of photographs depicting them, images captured from within the confines of their own dwelling. The Mercer family had settled into the suburban residence during a winter of early nightfall and bare trees standing stark against the cold sky. They were captivated by the two-story structure, with its weathered siding and creaking floors, believing it exuded character and history. Little did they foresee the depth of history the house harbored, or the jarring collision it would have with their present. Detective Sarah Connors, accompanied by her partner, arrived at the scene where the crime scene unit had already sealed off the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's voice had trembled over the phone as she recounted the hidden chamber beneath their living space. "We must document everything before anyone else ventures down there," Connors directed, donning latex gloves with practiced efficiency. The camera flashes punctuated the stairwell as the forensic team meticulously captured the eerie scene. The wooden steps groaned underfoot as they descended into the compact basement, akin in size to a standard bedroom, its concrete walls painted a drab gray. A lone chair was anchored in the center, beneath the unrelenting glare of the bare bulb that cast dancing shadows around the room. Yet it was the array of photographs that demanded attention, 37 snapshots meticulously arranged in a timeline. "These span nearly 4 weeks," remarked Connor's partner, scrutinizing the timestamps inked on the reverse of the prints. "Look at this one, Mrs. Mercer dozing on the sofa, Mr. Mercer at the dining table, the children in their rooms." Investigation uncovered no evidence of forced entry, no signs of break-ins or tampered locks. The security system had remained silent. Nothing tangible had been pilfered, only their privacy and any semblance of security they once held. Forensic analysis unveiled multiple fingerprints within the basement, most belonging to prior occupants of the residence. Records divulged that the house had changed hands 6 times in the past decade, each family departing within a year, selling at diminished prices. None had ever divulged the existence of a basement. "We must interview every former owner," Connors instructed, flipping through her notepad. The case took a chilling turn as they delved into the property's history. Discrepancies surfaced in the records, blueprints altered between sales, permits filed then retracted, inspection reports heavily redacted. A breakthrough arrived during the interrogation of the contractor who had renovated the house 7 years prior. His visage drained of color upon viewing images of the concealed basement. "No such room exists," he adamantly declared, his hands quivering. "I gutted that space down to the foundation. There was no basement, no door, nothing beneath the living room aside from soil and concrete." Extraction of data from a memory card found secreted within the light fixture revealed hundreds more images on their evidence boards, not solely of the Mercers, but of preceding families. Children slumbering, parents bickering, intimate moments, mundane routines, all surreptitiously captured by an unwelcome observer. The investigation took a darker twist with the retrieval of audio files from a weatherproof box buried in the basement's corner. Voice recordings of conversations held in the master bedroom, kitchen, and living area. Despite an exhaustive search, no sophisticated microphones were found, yet the sound quality suggested otherwise. "We must dismantle every wall," Connors declared, her tone laced with urgency. "Inspect the air vents, light fixtures, electrical outlets. The perpetrator has been surveilling these families for years." Concealed behind the photograph-laden wall, investigators stumbled upon a narrow passage leading to a compact monitoring station. A desk, a chair, a laptop linked to an array of wireless cameras, and a journal brimming with meticulous observations on each family that had dwelled in the house, their routines, their schedules, their disputes, their susceptibilities. The script mirrored the handwriting of the property's original builder, a man named Edward Kelvin. Records hinted at his demise during the house's construction, a detail that grew increasingly dubious as the probe unfolded. No official death record existed. No funeral arrangements were documented. Edward Kelvin had seemingly vanished from public archives. The final entries in the journal veered into delirium. Phrases like "they never glanced downward" and "they never perceived me" recurred obsessively. The ultimate page bore a solitary sentence: "The next family arrives tomorrow." Analysis of fingerprints affirmed what detectives had begun to suspect: Edward Kelvin had never vacated the house he erected. Instead, he had withdrawn into its concealed recesses, crafting a labyrinth of vantage points from which to monitor families who believed themselves solitary occupants. The manhunt spanned 3 days. Kelvin was discovered curled within a crawlspace between the second-floor bedrooms, his emaciated form adept at navigating the narrow passages he had fashioned within the walls. His eyes blinked against the beam of flashlights, unaccustomed to direct illumination. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as if they were players in his exclusive drama. He detailed observing them with the detached precision of a scientist scrutinizing specimens. Professed to never intruding upon them, never filching from them, never directly meddling in their lives, he had solely watched, recorded, chronicled. "They invited me in," he informed investigators, his tone soft and logical. "They signed the papers, they became mine." Psychological evaluation pinpointed Kelvin's severe delusions, wherein he perceived himself as the custodian of the house rather than an interloper. The families were mere transitory guests in what he considered his eternal. The Mercer family forsook the property, following the precedent set by their predecessors, abandoning their possessions and departing solely with laden suitcases. The house languished vacant as the legal proceedings unfolded. The trial laid bare the extent of Kelvin's surveillance network: hidden chambers accessible solely through crawl spaces, observation posts seamlessly integrated into the edifice, all meticulously devised prior to the initial brick being laid. The house had been conceived as a voyeuristic apparatus from its inception, its occupants unwitting actors in Kelvin's obsessive documentation. Upon the jury's pronouncement, Kelvin exhibited no reaction. He had already retreated into the labyrinth of his mind, where he could still traverse unseen through the corridors of the house now relegated to memory. Eventually, the property was razed, its subterranean depths excavated and filled. Yet, for the families who had resided there, the violation endured. They remained haunted not by what had been stripped from them, but by what had lurked unseen, watching, listening, recording their most intimate moments from within walls they had trusted to safeguard them. Occasionally, in tranquil instants, they found themselves glancing upward at air vents, light fixtures, the junctures where walls met ceilings, pondering if they were genuinely solitary now, reflecting if they ever truly had been. Story 21. The old house had sat silent and empty for many years, shrouded in whispers of a young woman who vanished without a trace. When the new occupants crossed the threshold, they were met with a peculiar sight: the bedroom door stubbornly locked from within. With a determined effort, they forced it open, unveiling a room frozen in time, suffused with a musty stillness that whispered of secrets long kept hidden. The bed was neatly made, the mirror gleamed spotless, and a lone candle had burned down to a mere puddle of wax, frozen in time like tears shed in solitude. Amidst this eerie tableau, a weathered notebook lay open on the desk, its pages adorned with fresh ink that spoke of a tale left unfinished. Detective Morgan pored over the notebook, tracing the delicate script of Elise Winters, a young woman who had vanished years ago at the age of 26. Her words danced across the pages in a dance of elegance, capturing her fears and suspicions until the final entry etched with urgency and dread. "I know he's watching me tonight, the ink pleaded, revealing a chilling truth that lingered in the stale air of the room. As the investigation unfolded, a web of deceit and betrayal unfurled, linking Elise to a prestigious law firm embroiled in a scandal of manipulated data and hidden truths. The detective uncovered a trail of corruption leading to the heart of the firm, where powerful men conspired to silence those who dared to speak the truth. The room held secrets that whispered of a brave soul who sought justice in the face of darkness, a testament to a life cut short but not forgotten. Through hidden passages and concealed truths, the story unraveled, revealing a sinister plot that led to the door of Vincent Harriman, a man of power and influence. His facade crumbled under the weight of evidence, exposing the depths of his depravity and the lengths he would go to protect his secrets. Justice, though delayed, found its mark as Harriman faced the consequences of his actions. And so the house stood witness to a tale of courage and betrayal, a haunting reminder of a life lost but not in vain. The room where Elise made her final stand echoed with the whispers of justice served, a beacon of light in the darkness that shrouded the truth. As night fell, casting shadows upon the empty house, a faint light flickered in the upstairs window, a silent vigil honoring the memory of a woman who refused to be silenced. In the stillness of the night, the house held its secrets close, a silent guardian of a story that would never be forgotten. Story 22. The tale of the new homeowners and the mysterious intercom system whispered through the corridors of time, weaving a chilling narrative that lingered in the shadows of the old Victorian manor. Daniel and Meredith Parker, drawn to the charm of the historic property, soon found themselves entangled in a web of secrets that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. As the crackling intercom beckoned with cryptic messages in the dead of night, the Parkers felt a shiver of unease creeping into their hearts. What began as a curious quirk soon escalated into a haunting revelation, plunging them into a realm where past and present intertwined with eerie precision. Detective Sarah Reeves, with her keen intuition, sensed there was more to the intercom's whispers than met the eye. The Parkers' distress called her to the manor, where the air was thick with the weight of untold stories waiting to be unearthed. Daniel's voice trembled as he recounted the spectral encounters that had plagued their once peaceful abode. Meredith's eyes held a silent plea for understanding as she revealed the hidden journal that bore witness to a tragic tale of love turned to darkness. The journal's yellowed pages spoke of Aliner's fear and Vincent's betrayal, painting a vivid portrait of a woman silenced by violence and deceit. The truth, buried beneath layers of deception, awaited its moment to rise from the depths of silence. With each revelation, Detective Reeves pieced together the puzzle of the Blackwood house, where echoes of a long-forgotten crime reverberated through time. The discovery of Aliner's remains beneath the garden shed laid bare the heinous truth that had long been concealed within the walls of the manor. Vincent Blackwood's cold confession sent a chill down the detective's spine, his calm demeanor belying the darkness that lurked within his soul. The house, a silent witness to his crimes, whispered its secrets to those who dared to listen, weaving a tapestry of sorrow and redemption. As justice finally caught up with Vincent, the house stood as a solemn reminder of the price paid for silence and the power of voices long silenced. Daniel and Meredith, haunted by the specter of the past, bid farewell to the manor, leaving behind the echoes of a tragedy that would forever linger in the halls. The intercom, now a relic of bygone days, fell silent as the house embraced a new chapter, its secrets buried deep within the earth. Detective Reeves, driving past the property in the fading light of day, felt a whisper of wind carrying the echoes of Alina's voice, a poignant reminder of the house that answered back. Story 23, the hotel seemed frozen in time, a relic of forgotten days where transient souls sought brief respite. The key felt heavy in her hand, given to her by the clerk with a cryptic warning that lingered in the air like a whispered secret. Avoid the last door on the left, his voice barely audible, laden with a mysterious weight. Intrigue tugged at her senses. That night, amidst the hush of the dimly lit corridor, she found herself standing before the fateful door. The brass handle sent a chill through her, and as she leaned in closer, the wood whispered a hidden tale. Behind that unassuming facade, a presence stirred, a breath mingling with the stillness of the night. Detective Morgan Reed, weary-eyed and resolute, crossed the threshold marked by yellow tape, a barrier between the ordinary world and the realm of shadows. The scent of iron lingered, a metallic tang that spoke of violence too familiar. In the stark room, contradictions danced, a pristine bathroom, an untouched bed, and in between, the stark tableau of tragedy. A young woman lay motionless, her golden locks splayed like a halo, eyes fixed on eternity with a silent plea. Reed knelt beside her, a silent witness to the cruel hand of fate. The forensic technician, stoic in his duty, captured the scene in cold precision, his words a grim echo of the past. The third in a tragic series, each bearing the same mark of darkness. Reed nodded, her mind a labyrinth of questions without answers. The victim, adorned in finery out of place in such desolation, held secrets in her stillness. A handbag spilled its contents, untouched by greed. This was not a crime of material gain, but of something deeper, more insidious. The hotel manager, a specter of guilt, hovered on the fringes, his tale of the lone arrival tinged with sorrow. The truth unfurled in the absence of forced entry, the lack of struggle. The killer moved in shadows familiar to the victim, a phantom of trust turned treacherous. Back at the precinct, Reed faced a wall of images, 3 women, connected by threads of tragedy, their lives extinguished in the silence of cheap motel rooms. As the days wove into a tapestry of relentless pursuit, the investigation unraveled threads of deceit. Surveillance footage yielded no revelations, a testament to the killer's cunning. Elaine Werner, a puzzle of contradictions, led a life that belied her tragic end. In the whisper of confessions, a name emerged, C, a phantom from her past. Reed delved deeper, threading the needle of truth through the fabric of lies. In Werner's workplace, the facade cracked, revealing shards of a forbidden liaison. Charles Emerson, a man of influence and secrets, stood at the center of the storm. His alibi held firm, a shield against suspicion, yet his eyes betrayed a truth untold. The dance of interrogation unveiled a web of deceit, each strand leading closer to the heart of darkness. Forensic whispers sealed Emerson's fate, linking him to the crime in a dance of evidence too damning to deny. In the shadow of his downfall, the truth emerged, a twisted game of power and possession, where innocence was a lure and deception, a blade. Behind closed doors, Emerson's true face emerged, a mask of civility concealing a void where empathy should reside. The trial, a theater of justice, cast its final act in the harsh light of truth. Families sought solace in the sentence pronounced, a verdict that echoed through the hollow chambers of the courtroom. Emerson, a man of shadows, faced a lifetime of reckoning, his eyes devoid of remorse, his soul a barren wasteland. In the aftermath, Reed carried the weight of the case, a burden of unspoken truths and unanswered questions. The media dubbed it the door on the left mystery, a tale that captivated minds and chilled hearts. Behind closed doors, she found herself haunted by the echoes of the past, counting the steps to that fateful threshold where secrets whispered in the spaces between. And in the evidence vault, 3 keys lay dormant, emblems of a darkness that once roamed unchecked. They stood as silent sentinels, guarding the memory of lives lost to the night, a reminder that some doors once opened can never be closed. Story 24. She glided through the front door, a gentle dance of dust in the still air surrounding her. The abandoned house stood frozen in time, its walls shedding memories, its furniture draped in ghostly sheets. Each step she took felt like a journey into a forgotten moment, except for the enigma that awaited her. The doors, they whispered their secrets. Every handle she turned, every path she followed, led her back to the parlor's embrace. A maze of corridors that looped back on themselves, a puzzle with no solution. The only escape was the entrance she had made, but when she turned to retreat, the door had vanished into the shadows. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's still form had transformed the once forgotten Victorian dwelling into a stage for tragedy. Detective Sarah Lind lingered at the threshold, observing the spectral figures of forensic experts drifting through the dimness like phantoms. The house had become a subject of local lore, the place where compasses lost their way, where whispers of unseen eyes watching sent shivers down the spine. Now, beneath its peeling façade, lay secrets far darker than any whispered tale. The initial findings suggest she passed 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his words barely breaking the silence. Asphyxiation appears to be the cause of her untimely departure. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture serene, hands folded in a peaceful repose. No signs of struggle marred the scene, no traces of a battle fought. An unsettling stillness draped the room, unsettling even the most seasoned of investigators. Lind, her gaze tracing the lines of her notes, inquired, who stumbled upon the grim discovery. Her partner, a shadow in the dimness, replied, a real estate agent showing the property to prospective buyers. They entered, beheld her silent figure, mistaking her for an intruder until they drew closer. The house had stood vacant since the passing of its former mistress, Alina Blackwood, nearly half a decade past. Legal disputes had left the property in a state of limbo, unwanted, unclaimed, a faded memory except for the curious and the daring. Morgan Pierce, a student of 26 summers, delved into the mysteries of architectural anomalies for her scholarly pursuits. Known for her meticulous nature, her drive for knowledge, she found herself drawn to spaces that defied the norms of design. The abandoned Victorian, with its whispers of disorientation, would have beckoned to her like a siren's song. Her roommate reported her absence 2 days prior, Lind noted, tracing the threads of the narrative. Morgan spoke of visiting the house where paths cross in pursuit of her studies. The investigation unveiled a pattern of visits by Morgan in the weeks leading to her demise. Her journals spoke of ethereal echoes, chilling drafts, and doors that led to ever-shifting chambers. In her final entry, she mused about bringing specialized tools to capture what she dubbed spatial enigmas. Yet those instruments remained elusive, lost to the darkness that now cloaked her research. The post-mortem examination unveiled a curious detail, a hint of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, a substance derived from a plant used in arcane rites, known to induce visions and confusion, but not in a dosage fatal. She abhorred recreational substances, her beloved attested during questioning. Morgan held her methods sacred. She would not have jeopardized her senses willingly. Digital traces on Morgan's device unveiled fragments of conversations, exchanges with a kindred soul who shared her fascination with the enigmatic house. They danced around intimate truths, veiled in cryptic prose. The house retains its memories, one message hinted. It yearns for someone to unravel its truths. The trail led Lind to Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural lore who had engaged in discourse with Morgan. His knowledge of esoteric spaces had captivated her, blossoming their professional liaison into a more intimate bond. Reeves, when interrogated, bore the weight of her loss with a sorrow that felt genuine. "The house is more than it seems," he offered. The architect wove illusions and deceptions into its very fabric. Morgan believed in a deeper truth, a reality beyond the tricks of perception. Yet Reeves stood beyond suspicion at the time of Morgan's passing, a lecture captured on distant cameras, alibis woven in the fabric of evidence. A revelation unfolded from an unexpected source, a descendant of a leaner Blackwood, now dwelling in distant lands. Contacted by the investigators, he unraveled a tale steeped in shadow. "My kin were not the sole Blackwoods to meet their end in that dwelling," he confessed. Generations succumbed within its walls, seated in the parlor, eyes closed in a final slumber. The family called it the beckoning. His cache of journals, a testament to lives cut short by a force only whispered about. A secondary search of the estate unearthed a hidden alcove behind the parlor hearth. Within its depths lay Morgan's missing instruments and a revelation. A chamber adorned with relics from myriad cultures, a mosaic of history arranged with precision. At its heart rested a figurine, its features softened by the caress of ages. Analysis identified the idol as a deity linked to the spaces between worlds, to thresholds unspoken. Traces of the alkaloid graced the artifacts, binding Morgan's fate to the whispers of the past. The case took a somber twist as the veils of dust unveiled the presence of another at Morgan's final moments. Partial prints alien to known visitors whispered of a silent watcher among the shadows. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered in his sanctum, a mirror of Morgan's fate. Seated in peace, the same alkaloid staining his legacy, a key clutched in his grip. A key that unlocked no door in his abode but fit the hidden sanctum within the Victorian's heart. In a final missive, a testament sealed in digital ink, Reeves inscribed, "The house does not bind you in flesh but in perception." Morgan spoke true, the paths lead where they always have, but a veil of illusion blinds you to the truth. Once you see, you can depart at will, yet by then the desire to leave has waned. The case, a riddle unsolved, a tale of shadows and whispers of a house where all doors circle back to the beginning. The Victorian, now shunned and forsaken, stands as a mausoleum of enigmas, its secrets veiled from prying eyes. Yet whispers persist of lights flickering within its walls on nights steeped in mystery, of visitors who vanish into the mists of time. Some claim the house claims those who grasp too tightly its truths. Others whisper of a power ancient and profound, dwelling in the rifts between what is seen and what remains hidden. The answer eludes the seeker like an exit in a labyrinth where every path leads to the start. Story 25, renovations always bring forth curious discoveries. Hidden relics of the past, forgotten treasures tucked away in the shadows. But when Sarah and Michael lifted the floorboards of their newly acquired Victorian home, they stumbled upon a folded letter, carefully concealed beneath the aged wood. The paper crinkled with age, the ink faded, but the words remained stark. "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the cryptic message, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the quiet house, sending shivers down their spines. Eager to unravel the mystery, Detective Alina Reed arrived at the scene, her seasoned hands delicately retrieving the note from its hiding place. The couple's inadvertent touch had tainted the evidence, but their genuine fear was palpable. Background checks on Sarah and Michael revealed nothing amiss, just a young couple with a promising future. However, the history of the house told a different tale. Once owned by the enigmatic Hargrove family, the house lay dormant for years following the passing of its last inhabitant, the reclusive widow Margaret Hargrove. Though her death appeared uneventful, the discovery of the hidden note hinted at a darker narrative. Forensic analysis dated the letter back 2 decades, its distress evident in the trembling script. As Reed delved deeper, a tale of fear and secrets began to unfold. Franklin Hargrove, a respected teacher turned recluse, harbored a growing paranoia in his final days, haunted by the specter of a mysterious collector. Margaret's sister whispered of debts and danger, of 3 ominous knocks that sealed their fate. With the aid of forensics and Margaret's haunting diaries, the truth emerged from the shadows. Beneath the house, a grim discovery awaited: an unidentified skeleton, a victim of long-buried violence. Dental records linked the remains to Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark who vanished without a trace. Through Margaret's words and the cold evidence, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Franklin's desperate act to protect his beloved in a moment of madness, the silent collusion of Margaret to bury the truth deep within the earth. As justice belatedly prevailed, Sarah and Michael chose to part ways with the tainted house, leaving its dark history behind. The empty halls now echo with whispers of the past, of 3 distinct knocks that pierce the night. The note, a chilling relic of bygone terror, lies in storage, a warning etched in time. Detective Reed's final report mused on the lingering mysteries, the shadows of the past that refuse to fade entirely. Whether it was Mercer, Franklin, or another unseen hand that knocked, the truth lingers in the silent corridors of the vacant home. Some secrets, Reed reflected, are destined to remain veiled in the mists of uncertainty, their whispers haunting the dreams of those who dare to listen. Story 26, the costume store was on the verge of shutting its doors, clearing out its old stock. Among the relics, a woman discovered a mask on a forgotten shelf, its features intricate yet eerily realistic. As she placed it on the counter, the cashier hesitated, muttering, "That's not ours." Perplexed, she checked for a tag, but none was to be found. With a shrug, she brought it home. That very night, she awoke to a gentle rustle, a whisper of fabric in motion. The mask had vanished from the dresser where she had left it, now perched on her nightstand, gazing directly at her. The woman known as Catherine Reed was stumbled upon by her neighbor. The front door stood slightly ajar, allowing the morning light to spill into the dim interior. Originally there to return a borrowed book, the neighbor instead stumbled upon a sight that would haunt investigators for years to come. Catherine lay lifeless on her bedroom floor, the mask nowhere in sight. Detective Morgan arrived as forensics documented the scene, the click of shutters accompanying the hushed voices around them. "No signs of forced entry," observed an officer, jotting down notes. The detective nodded, her eyes scanning the room, absorbing details others might overlook. A drawer slightly ajar, a glass of water with lipstick marks on the rim. Everything appeared ordinary, except for the woman who would never awaken. The medical examiner, with a solemn expression, remarked, "Initial inspection reveals no clear cause of death. No evident wounds, no signs of struggle." Gesturing towards her face, he added, "Take note of the terror etched into her features." The detective knelt closer, murmuring, "Something terrified her to her demise." Catherine, a quiet art appraiser, was known for her meticulous nature and passion for authenticity. Colleagues spoke of her knack for spotting forgeries with ease. She could detect a fake with a glance, her boss mentioned during interviews. The detective pondered whether this talent had unknowingly led to her tragic end. Surveillance footage from the costume store unveiled a peculiar occurrence. The cashier appeared genuinely puzzled by the mask, summoning the owner over, who adamantly denied any affiliation with it. Though the audio was indistinct, lip readers later confirmed his words, "We never stocked anything like that." The detective paid a visit to the now vacant shop, where the owner nervously fidgeted. "That mask surfaced during our clearance sale. Nobody knows its origin. It wasn't part of our inventory," he confessed. Under further scrutiny, he reluctantly disclosed, Such anomalies occurred sporadically after we acquired items from a deceased collector's estate sale under bizarre circumstances. A breakthrough emerged when forensics unearthed minuscule fibers embedded in Catherine's fingertips. She clenched onto something, the lab technician articulated. These fibers are peculiar, not contemporary synthetics. They seem to be a blend of human hair and an unidentified organic material not matching any known database. The investigation unveiled a trail of similar deaths spanning decades. Each victim had acquired a peculiar mask shortly before their demise, their faces frozen in terror. Yet each case remained unresolved. A retired detective familiar with one such incident agreed to share insights. In a dimly lit room, he tremulously slid a weathered file across the table. We discovered inscriptions within each mask, concealed behind the inner lining, he disclosed. Ancient symbols. A scholar we consulted linked them to a ritual involving soul migration. A breakthrough arose from an unexpected source. A journal concealed behind loose paneling in Catherine's apartment contained her final entry detailing a sense of being watched, a presence lurking in her abode. She chronicled her exploration into the mask's origins post the cashier's odd reaction, linking it to a series of enigmatic deaths. "The mask moves," she fervently penned. "It observes me at night. I found markings inside symbols mirroring those from unsolved cases. The collector of these masks perished likewise." Each mask claims a life before moving on. The entity seeks a new host when the mask reaches someone who comprehends its true nature. The detective pieced together the puzzling evidence, the strange fibers, Catherine's inquiries, the pattern of similar deaths. The medical examiner eventually attributed her demise to cardiac arrest induced by extreme fear. What could induce such terror to halt one's heart? The case took a twisted turn when surveillance footage from a nearby residence revealed a detail overlooked by investigators. A figure emerged from Catherine's dwelling in darkness, donning what seemed to be a mask mirroring Catherine's stride, yet somehow off, mechanical, as if someone wore her movements like an ill-fitted garment. An alert was issued for the missing mask, but it never resurfaced until half a year later. Reports surfaced of an unusual mask surfacing in a vintage store across the nation. By the time authorities arrived, it had been sold, the buyer's identity unrecorded. The case remains officially unresolved. The detective safeguarded Catherine's journal in her desk, a stark reminder of a truth too absurd for official documentation. Sometimes in the dead of night she awakens abruptly, sensing a gaze upon her. She secures her windows and doors, fastens the locks, endeavoring not to dwell on the mask that may one day find a new holder who discerns its genuine nature, a receptacle yearning to be filled, passing from one victim to the next in an eternal cycle commencing centuries ago and persisting till today. The mask lingers out there, awaiting rediscovery. And when it resurfaces, another soul will stir to the gentle stirrings in the shadows, only to find it inching closer as they slumber, its vacant eye sockets fixated on them, craving what lies beyond their gaze. Story 27. In the stillness of the night, a flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen, a mere glitch in the feed, or so the mother thought. Brushing it off as interference, she settled back, only to be jolted by crackling audio and a hushed voice that whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down her spine, freezing her in place. Racing to her son's room, her heart thundering in her chest, she found an empty crib, the room untouched, the window sealed shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly was a plush rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed on her. Rebecca's scream pierced the night, raw and unyielding, echoing through the walls till the neighbors alerted emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they discovered her cradling the stuffed rabbit, swaying on the nursery floor. Samuel, her 4-month-old baby, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a void of unanswered questions. The investigation stumbled in the darkness, grasping at scant leads. No forced entry marks, no tampered security system, just the eerie echo of that mysterious voice on the monitor. How could someone slip into a locked home, snatch a child, and escape without a trace, save for a solitary toy left in the shadows? Suspicions turned to the mother, Rebecca, her demeanor scrutinized under the weight of grief. Her husband, Daniel, absent on business, cast a shadow of doubt over their strained marriage and Rebecca's struggle with postpartum depression. The community whispered rumors behind closed doors, pointing fingers in the absence of truth. A glimmer of hope emerged when fibers foreign to the household were discovered on the nursery windowsill, a hint of a climber's rope, a silent intruder scaling the walls under the cloak of night. Security footage whispered of a dark figure prowling in the shadows, leaving behind a solitary footprint in the garden soil, a boot mark of expertise. Daniel returned, a man haunted by shadows of deception. His hands bore tales of rock climbing, a newfound hobby to mask hidden truths. Financial secrets unraveled, exposing a web of deceit, life insurance policies, clandestine calls, a second family unbeknownst to Rebecca. As the threads of betrayal unraveled, the baby monitor emerged as a beacon of truth, its digital whispers leading investigators to a chilling revelation. The signal had been hijacked, the voice manipulated from afar, casting a web of deceit that ensnared even the most vigilant. In a dim basement, Samuel was found in the arms of Elaine, a woman with vacant eyes and a haunted past. Through the tangled strands of DNA and memories, the truth unfurled. Elaine, Daniel's first wife, a ghost from the past seeking solace in stolen moments. Denials crumbled under the weight of evidence, encrypted messages painting a damning picture of greed and betrayal. The courtroom hushed as the baby monitor's audio echoed once more, revealing Daniel's cough, a telltale sign of guilt in the night of the abduction. Justice was swift, the verdict decisive. Daniel and Elaine faced the consequences of their crimes, while Rebecca and Samuel sought solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. The baby monitor stood as a silent witness, holding the truth in its digital embrace, a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. As Samuel grew, oblivious to the night he vanished, Rebecca kept the stuffed rabbit tucked away, a silent sentinel of a past she wished to forget. The monitor never lied, its whispers echoing through the darkness, a testament to the unforeseen mysteries that dwell in the quiet of the night.